Benson and the greatest American hero won't be seen tonight.
I don't believe it.
But they'll return soon. Now stay tuned for the following special presentation.
Please support the Word Balloon podcast by going to patreon.com/wordballoon. Become a part of the League of Word Balloon listeners. That's patreon.com/wordballoon.
Kingdom Come is 4 separate issues, 48 pages apiece. It was an all-immersive kind of lifestyle for me.
It blew people away. I mean, this was the most sought-after book there was.
This was something very new, very different.
No one had seen anything like that at that scale before.
It was amazing.
I never thought from anything that people would still be talking about this book 25 years later.
There were voices and lightnings and thunderings. This was my dream.
Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. You know, it's my 20th year doing Word Balloon, and one of the guys that was with me from year one is our guest tonight, Paul Jenkins. Welcome back to Word Balloon.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Doing all right, man. And, you know, I always think of, and I'll say it at the beginning of the show, that fantastic Wizard Chicago panel you did with Brubaker and Bendis and Rucka. And it was all about comic book writing. Mm-hmm. And man, I'm telling you, I think that's the first time I met you. Yeah. And I thank you for always coming back over these many years.
Always ready to come back. Always armed with my requisite cup of tea. So I'm prepared and ready, mate.
Fantastic, man. Well, we're all excited, Paul, because you know, it's always thrilling when a friend's character makes it to TV or film. And listen, the comics are great. And everything, but everyone, we're all excited for the coming premiere of Thunderbolts, and finally, after a bunch of little hints and in shadows, it's confirmed. Bob is, of course, Bob the Sentry, and yeah, man. So you were there at the red carpet Monday night, right?
Yeah, I was. I had, been flown out there, which was nice, and I actually worked on the film a little bit as a consultant. So I had some really good experiences on the red carpet, actually, and certainly at the after party, it was great. And I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But it's kind of nice that one thing I can definitely say to kind of kick us off is that Jake Schreier, the amazing director of the film,
is this him here?
Yeah. That's Jake, right?
I grabbed these from your Instagram.
Yeah,
Paul.
Lovely guy, right? Lovely guy. And so I walk into the after party, and I'm sort of like, well, don't go to many of these, but I don't really care. And Jake starts yelling, Paul. It's like Paul Jenkins, and I'm like, man, aren't you busy? Like, you're busy right now, But he's like, man. And so I come over, and he's a really sweet guy, and he really cares about. I think he really cares about what he makes, right? Which, by the way, I think is what real, true professionals do. And he wanted to know if I thought he had done a good job. And I'm like, mate, listen, I'm not going to be the arbiter of it, but I would tell you, I think you did a fantastic job. I think that you made a film. I think you get these big blockbusters, right? And there's going to be a blockbuster here and a thing here, and they're going to try that. But in it, you get the occasional Black Panther, and you get the occasional Guardians of the Galaxy. You don't really know you're going to get it, but you get it. And it felt like Thunderbolts was it. And I think it really went. What was so good about what happened with Thunderbolts was that they had really gone on the angle of mental health, and they'd really listened to a lot of the stuff that I'd said I think was thematic in there, and they really went for it. And so I'm sort of proud in a sense that I got a chance to add something to what they were doing, and it meant something to them, and then they actually implemented it. Not that I made the film. I'm just, they really went for the idea of the mental health aspect.
They listen to you, which is, hey, man, listen, we all know comic book adaptations that aren't consistent with the character. I always think, I just talked to Palmiotti a couple months ago, and the Jonah Hex, Josh Brolin movie, which should have been a slam dunk. Mm-hmm. And they make this crazy steampunk superhero thing instead of making what it always was and should be, a traditional Western. Yeah. And it's like, man, you have the right actor, you got the right character. and you blew it. And it was so disappointing, you know?
I think in this film, they had the right actor, they had the right director, they had the right cast, they had the right stuff. The only thing, so there's a weird thing that happens to you when you make a lot of stuff like I have, right? People will go and say, well, what do you think about the person that followed you on the Hulk? And I'm like, look, let me tell you something. When the last day that I wrote the Hulk, that was it. I was like, I don't have an opinion about, like, I'll have a positive opinion if you want. I don't have an opinion about the next person and why it contradicted my run. That's their run, right? Like, so I'm not going to have an opinion about what the film people did that was different from the Sentry origin. There were a couple of things that were different. And I think there was an opportunity in some ways to really play up the duality of the person so that the way that I wrote him, he was the Void and the Sentry at the same time.
Yes.
You know, and I think they wanted to do these as aspects of him. And I think that him being in conflict with himself in real time actually is more of a metaphor for the schizophrenia and mental health challenge.
Okay. I understand that. Well, and also, I mean, God, I've said this to other creators as well, and I can only imagine it must be when you leave a character and someone else picks it up on the one hand, and certainly creating the Sentry.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's great to see other writers and artists pick them up and everything. But it also must be like kind of like seeing your old girlfriend running around with somebody new. And like, you know, do you really want to dwell on that? You know, it's like, hey, man.
I don't know. It doesn't seem fair because if it, you know, just so we're clear, I just took someone else's old girlfriend when I take it over. So, you know, I can't really be that jealous if someone takes that same girlfriend, you know.
That's true. That's true. From the darkness to the Hulk to Spider-Man. I respect that.
The Hulk is a fickle mistress, you know.
Well, well, I'm excited, man. I'm excited to see the movie. And here's we mentioned the actor. Here's you and Lewis Pullman, right?
Yeah. So yeah, at the after party, I mean, I guess I can say this. I always want to protect anyone's privacy. You know, Lewis is as much as anyone else, right? But I don't think. I mean, basically, I met Lewis, and he was like, man, I'm so glad to meet you. It was the same with Jake Schreier, right? Because I hadn't met him working on the film, because I was just basically working with the filmmakers.
Okay.
And he said, I'm really happy to meet you. And I'm like, man, that's really cool. And so I got a chance to share a couple of thoughts with him about what he had done. He wanted to know if I liked the way that he portrayed my character. And I said, man, listen, I can tell you this. I'm really hopeful that he's amazing for your career. It will feel fantastic to me that this character has been something that's really big in your life and you represent him. I talked with him a little bit about ways in which I thought the Sentry represent. I get contacted, John, by a lot of people who are struggling with their mental health and who tell me that Sentry is like really meaningful to them.
Wow.
Yeah, all the time, and especially lately, right? And so I said, Lewis, I think this is going to happen to you. I think that when you're at shows and you're going to meet a lot of people that will say, man, this means a lot to me, right? So we chatted about that for a while. And then he goes, do you mind if I get your number? And I'm like, yeah, fine. So we stayed in contact, you know, and we left and he gave me a big hug and he was, you know, he's being pulled everywhere, right?
Sure.
But it was very gratifying. And I think it speaks to the integrity of the film that Lewis and Jake, they weren't big mucky mucks. They literally wanted to talk to me about the creative. And I was like, that's why they've made a halfway decent film right there, you know?
That's great, man. No pictures with you and Florence Pugh or Julia Louis-Dreyfus?
Because I don't go searching for it, right? And I suppose you could if you... There's an interesting one with Florence Pugh because the first appearance of Yelena Belova was actually in Humans #5. So we gave her a first comic book appearance.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Now,
well, you and Jay again.
Yeah, me and Jay. Yeah. But I want to be clear that doesn't mean that we created it, right? And you know, who created what has been a bit of a touchy subject for me this week.
Yeah.
So I didn't create, neither did Jay, Yelena Belova. We were asked if we could put her in Inhumans so that she could show up and be a real character in the Marvel Universe. So we gave her first appearance. That's what that means. But we didn't create the character. We wrote less than 2 pages of her, and then we moved on, right? So, but it is kind of cool that I could say, well, yeah, you had your first appearance in comics in our book, you know?
That's great, man. No, and Palmiotti, I guess, was there as well Monday.
Yeah, Jimmy was there. Joe Quesada was there. Jay was there, so I got to hang out with Jay. I got to sit with my old mate JG Jones and his lovely wife Dawn. JG's the loveliest guy. His wife Dawn is lovely, so we got to hang out. I took a really funny special guest. So unfortunately, my poor wife Melinda, who by the way is literally Lindy in the Sentry. That's like it. Her name is Melinda, and I call her Lindy. So in the Sentry, the wife is called Lindy Lee, is after my wife. So she had back surgery. She was having back surgery. And I had said, listen, babe, I'm not going, right? And she's like, you're going. So I had to go to the premiere, got back into my hotel room at 2:30 in the morning, I think, and then literally got on the road at 4:30, 5 o'clock, then crossed LA for 2 hours. So I was shattered, but it was kind of a great experience. I went despite the fact I wanted to obviously look after my wife, you know.
Well, I'm glad that she's recovering from the surgery, and you know, you've always spoken glowingly about her back in your flogging a dead horse blogs back in that. Yeah. See, I remember, man. Come on,
Nigh perfect. She's just got one more scar.
Nigh perfect, indeed. That was the nickname. I couldn't remember it.
She's a little bit more nigh because she got another scar, so she's like upset about that. You know, like,
no, I understand. Well, here right away on Facebook, Steve Eden says the Sentry, best new comic character since the 70s. Wonderful work, Paul. And we'll include Jay in that as well. Yeah, man. Can you take me back? And I guess the story starts even before that initial Marvel fictional tease that, hey, guess what? We uncovered this old 1960s character that Stan created, and they never did anything with him. This guy, the Sentry.
Yeah, man. I mean, you're talking back. Okay, so in order to understand the Sentry and its creation, you have to understand like where I came from. You know, I had come over to the United States when I was young, and I was trying to be a musician. You know, I was teaching music and drama to learning disabled children, and I ended up in Northampton, Massachusetts. And you know, I've spoken about this quite a few times, but basically, if you're trying to be a musician, it means you're waiting on tables and you're doing whatever you can, and then you're trying to tour when you can and all that, right? And I met these guys that had a black and white comic book in town, and they had just sold the rights to make it into a toy. And they did an album cover for us for my band. It was actually really good. It was a picture of a skeletal couple on the floor of the Titanic after it had sunk, like dancing in the waves. Right? It was really cool. And I broke my leg playing soccer, and I went up to their offices and said, "Look, are you guys like, you need anyone? Because there's no way I'm going to be able to play with the band. I can't, you know, I'm not going to be able to, I've got to get around on crutches." And they went, "Yeah, man, we're really busy." And of course it was the Ninja Turtles, right?
Yes.
From the Ninja Turtles, we went to Tundra, and now probably 1989, 1990, through maybe 1992 or 3, I was the editor-in-chief over at Tundra because I worked my way up really quickly. I started at Mirage Studios, but really quickly, but basically when I started, I was there to put the books together, to basically do the editorial and the printing and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Get the orders, deal with the comic. And very quickly, I ended up doing quite a lot of other things, right? So I get out of that. I then go to Majestic, and in Cincinnati, I'm the editor-in-chief down there. I've got a bunch of other jobs. Then I come back, and this all leads to the creation of the Sentry, even though it's my origin story.
No, it's all good, man.
So I get back, and I think I was still the editor-in-chief of a company called Scoreboard, which wasn't going to happen. And I went over to Great Britain, and I was trying to reestablish contact with a lot of people that I knew. One of them was Alan Moore. So I go to Alan Moore's house in Northampton, England, and I'm chatting with Alan, and he was always a lovely guy. He was always super nice to me, a very pleasant guy. I know everyone sort of sees Alan as a wizard, but he's actually a very straightforward, kind of ordinary, pleasant human being.
Cool.
And he always treated me with the sort of see me at eye level kind of respect. You know, he's only ever been like that with me. And so I went to go see him to see if there was worth recruiting, to see if there were possibilities, but I doubt it would have happened, right? But I was talking with him about the work we had done on Big Numbers and stuff like that. And I said, Alan, you know, the way that you write and the way that you think, I would you know, I guess I should say to you is I kind of feel weird in saying to you, I think like that about comics too. Do you think I should have a go as a writer? And he's like, sounds all right, Paul, give it a shot. And that's why I went to San Diego. And well, I mean, certainly I had known people in the business. So I go to San Diego, it's 1993 or 4, and I meet Karen Berger, and suddenly I'm the writer of Hellblazer. I'd never having written anything at all, right? Well, once I started working on Hellblazer, I was thinking, okay, what else can I do, right? Because I'm not going to be the Hellblazer. I'm not really a horror guy, for one thing. But there I was, and I wrote so many issues of Hellblazer. So during that time, I wanted to do other things at Vertigo. And I made a pitch for the character Hourman, because I thought Vertigo would bring in a superhero character like essentially you could have said Sandman was, and you could have said Doom Patrol were. And I said, oh, you know, I saw this character that you have, because I'm not that familiar with comics. But you've got this character called Hourman, and he takes a pill, and he's a superhero for an hour, and then he's not. And I said, that to me would be an incredible story to write about addiction and mental health. Like, if you had a superpower, it would be the ultimate mega high. Talk about chasing the dragon. And then the next 23 hours, if you could only take one a day, the next 23 hours, you'd be like, I need the pill. I got to get it. You'd be incredibly addicted, and you'd be miserable.
Sure. So
I pitched it to Karen, and she said, look, we don't do superheroes, and we're just not going to. And then I took that Hourman pitch, and I brought it to an editor at DC called Kerry Kowalski, who worked there 30 years ago, right? And Kerry, you know, this is what Karen Berger said to me. She said, look, I love the idea of the superhero and the addiction and that, but, you know, can you make a new character out of it? I said, okay, absolutely. I'd love to make a new character out of it. And so from there, I created the Sentry. I thought that the Sentry was this idea about, you know, actually, I wanted to call him the Sentinel, and apparently it was already taken. So we changed it to the Sentry, which is good. And so I wrote the entire first issue out, the whole story. I wrote everything out. You know, I like made this entire thing. And then I sent it to Kerry Kowalski, and she's like, I want to champion this thing. I love this thing. But, you know, DC are not going to do a new character like that. They just weren't going to do it. And then years went by. I pitched it in Marvel. I didn't know anyone at Marvel. They were like, no, thanks very much. And so I'm like, well, you know, I guess I'm going to live in that place where I'm not really a Vertigo guy just because I'm not going to do horror all the time. And I'm not really a superhero guy. I'm going to live in this middle ground, right? And so I didn't think that the Sentry would maybe be real. And then, you know, pitched it 1, 2, 3 times to different places. They said no. But when Jay and I won an Eisner for Inhumans, they were quite open to us doing whatever we wanted to. And I persuaded Jay, mate, would you be okay with like doing this? And he said, I love that. I really like it. So, you know, again, part of the impetus for the Sentry being real is that Jay was like, yeah, I'd love to take that on and make that real. You know, it wouldn't have happened without Jay.
That's great, man. You'll forgive me, everybody. I didn't grab a Jay Lee image of the Sentry, but I did grab this cover from John Romita Jr. I think maybe the second arc of the Sentry, if I remember correctly, Paul.
Yeah, and it's funny, right? Like, I remember when we were doing Inhumans, I had a particular issue that I thought was the one. It's for what it's worth, it's issue 9, and it was about the Lusitania sinking, and that Triton witnesses the sinking of the Lusitania in the First World War and sees man's inhumanity towards man, and that it's witnessed by a little boy who thinks that Triton was a mermaid that saved him. Right. And it's really poignant, and everybody cries and goes, oh my God, that's the issue. And it wasn't the issue. The issue was number 2. The story about the kids came out and the internet blew up. And I was like, wow, you know, you never know. Right. And then by the time issue 9 came out, people were sort of like, yeah, it's pretty good, you know, but we've seen some good ones. So, and I'm like, bugger. Well, it's kind of like that with Sentry, right? Like, I loved the first one because it was always the first. In fact, the first issue of the Sentry was I'd written that entire pitch out, right? A long time ago. The first pitch I ever made was that first issue. So it all existed, right? And then when I did the second one, I was like, this is a triumph, man. I love this series. We got to do something really interesting here. it makes you understand that he thinks he may have been a superhero, but now he's being persuaded that he's not. Here's an interesting thing. There's a plot point in it where he's just at the point where they persuaded him that he's just delusional and that he's made up the Hulk and Fantastic Four. These are all constructs of his imagination. And they've all got illiterate names, you know, Reed Richards, Peter Parker. And they're like telling him how absurd it is. And he's just about to crack. And then he looks down and they're like, you've never been married. You have never been married. And he looks down and he realizes his hand has a ring on, and it has it doesn't have a ring on it. It has like the thing from his sunburn. And there's a little white ring around his thing. And he goes, wait, that's not true. I have been married. And then he suddenly remembers, right? Do you know whose idea that was, who helped me fix that story? That would be Lindy Lee, otherwise known as Nigh Perfect. She was the one who actually helped me solve that story problem when I said, I'm stuck here. She went, how about that?
That's great, man.
It's the one and only time she's ever contributed, but I like it. It was a good one.
1 point, Melinda. Well done. That's
1 point.
Man. That's beautiful. Excellent, man. No, truly, the whole because I remember, I want to say that they broke the story of the fake story in Wizard magazine, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So this is where that came from. So I think that Marvel were going through the requisites, right? But you have to understand they were going through the requisites why they can't publish something. They've been through it with me twice, I think, before, right? We can't publish that. We don't do new characters. But that wasn't really only the story of Marvel, because Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti were doing things that were very different, right? So for them, it was kind of like a yes. But even then, Joe was a bit like, I don't know if, I'm not sure, right? Like, I've got to make sure that as we go through Marvel Knights, you know, we've had success with the first 4 books.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've got to do what's next. And I don't know if pitching you and Jay to do that instead of the Avengers or Spider-Man is a good idea, right? But, you know, I was able to talk to Joe and Jimmy and tell them, hey, this is why I think it means something. This is why I think it's valuable. They agreed. And I don't know, but I'm going to go out on a limb and think that it might have been more Joe Quesada than anybody. Certainly, he was more actively involved in this hoax that we created about the creation of the Sentry. And so we did that, you know, and I think that really, that's an integrated marketing campaign, in my opinion. They integrated me and the story and the way it was being created and let me help them almost like devise parts of the marketing plan, even though it was their idea. Because I could say, yeah, well, these are forgotten hero. So, you know, the idea is that we should have known about this guy ever since the 50s. He predates the Fantastic Four by, you know, a couple of months, right? Or something like that. And if he's going to do that and he's the greatest that ever was, he's the golden guardian of good and all these wonderful things that we do, then, you know, we're going to kind of run the story in a particular way, right? And that's what they took. And by the way, there is something that I just explained to Jake Schreier. And you know, because Jake and I were talking at the after party, and Jake said, I'm really sorry that we couldn't really get in. Spoiler alert, I suppose, but we couldn't really get in a lot about the old comic stars because we were trying to think of a way to do that. Actually, no, I don't think it was Jake. I think it was a producer, Ryan, that I was talking to, and he said it basically said we were trying to do that, but we couldn't quite crack it, right? But what I then explained to him, he was like, oh my God, I didn't know that. So what you have to do is you have to go back to the Sentry and you have to look at what the story played out like. When he's introduced in the comic, he's the golden guardian of good and he stands up on the side and his cape blows and he doesn't cast a shadow, right? So that's cool. And then once he's done that, you see this like 70s version of the Sentry. And the 70s version is sort of like, let's experiment, man. I do whatever you like. It's all hippie and stuff and flowers in the background and crazy stuff.
Sure.
Then if you think about the evolution of comics, around about the 80s hit and like reality hits. Now you're talking in comics, you're talking Alan Moore, you're talking, you know, stuff when reality hits. And this is really cool time, right? 90s, though, was very different, in my opinion. I think 90s was a bit like, you know, that there were a lot of like, you know, sales gimmicks and, you know, stuff went badly in a sense. You know, this wasn't pure comics. This was chromium covers and, you know, teams sticking their ass out all the time and just standing there as a requisite roll call and stuff like that. That's very American, but it's not true to like storytelling as much, although there's some fun to be had. So it has its own merit, but I'd consider that the sort of nasty time. And then 2000s, when we started recovering comics, was the recovery period. Would you know what all of that is? You start off with the creation and the stuff and anything goes. Then you do like, oh my God, we're going to experiment. Then you fall to earth. Then it gets really bad. And then you recover. That's a drug experience. And the whole thing about it was that that comic experience was supposed to mirror his drug addiction.
Fantastic, man. That's great, Paul. Seriously, good meta stuff, man.
Right. And so I explained it to Ryan, and Ryan's like, oh my God, if only we'd known that, right? But it's okay. We'll write it in the Sentry movie, mate. You know?
Jesus, that's fantastic. A couple more comments from the chat. Dennis, Paul, what a talent. Love hearing it was a positive experience. I'm assuming the red carpet thing. Recently reread Deathmatch. Such a fun book. Any more comics in your future?
Thanks, Dennis. Listen, I got to tell you about Deathmatch, man.
Deathmatch, I remember we talked about it back in the day, but remind people.
Good book. I loved that book. I hated the title. It wasn't mine.
Was that Boom, Paul?
Yeah, it was Boom.
Yeah.
But Deathmatch was a comic that by the time I got to the end of issue 12, I was like, man, that was really clever. Like, you're never going to think you're going to read Deathmatch and have a clever, interesting book, but that's what it was. It was something I was like really proud of, you know. Any more comments in my future? I guess the best way to put it there is, yes, I got one project I'm doing right now. That'll get announced really quickly, really soon.
Cool.
More importantly, I think I just had a couple of conversations with a couple of publishers. And so, you know, I'm kind of exploring, you know, kind of coming back to comics a bit. I love doing them. I have so many friends that I love. And as you know, John, usually the problem I've always had is I'm not really that fond of the business itself, because I think that we have a better opportunity. I come from Europe. We write lots of different types of comics. We don't just do superheroes. And so I want to do more than just supers. You know?
Sure, absolutely. What was your, forgive me for forgetting the title, the thing you did with Humberto Ramos?
Fairy Quest. You know, we still have Fairy Quest in the works. We had done Fiction Squad. There's a bunch of stuff that I am doing, but I don't spend much time around the mainstream because I do so many other things, right?
Yeah.
And right now I'm doing a bunch of game design and stuff like that. But that being said, we'll see how those conversations go.
Okay, and remind people for Deathmatch, you know, the elevator pitch, the premise.
Well, Deathmatch was like the Hunger Games with superheroes. A bunch of superheroes that get abducted and put into an environment. But the reason it's clever, so that sounds on its face pretty banal and pretty straightforward and pretty much a, you know, Hunger Games, right? But why it was interesting is because they go into the arena and they literally, one of them has to kill the other one. Like, they're not surviving. And when they come out, they don't remember why they had to do it. But the moment they get in, they're told why they have to do it. And every single time they're like, shit, I have to do this. So you have to go through the story and find out, well, why are they killing each other? Why are they agreeing to this? What's happening? And we got to create like a load of new superheroes. They're great. There was one called the Box, and he was like a box jellyfish. He was really poisonous, you know? All I can tell you is that, you know, read that carefully, because you'll find out that something happens on page 1 ends up happening, meaning something on page 30 of like issue 12, you know?
Wow. So it kind of like Severance, that they have no memory. Do they remember killing, but they don't remember why?
Yeah, they're kind of shown each other, and they're shown, you know, and so you have this kind of like grid of people who are going to face off. And you know, right, that some of the best characters are going to end up facing off against each other. And you've actually, by the time you get near the end, you're like invested in them. I mean, I think, right? I certainly was. And I think people were invested, and you're like, man, I know that these two, like one of them's going to go. And that sucks, right? But if you think about that, that means it has meaning. Like, if I'm moving your emotions and you're like, I don't want one of these to die, then we've done something decent.
That's cool, man. Kari, and I agree with her, the 90s were a truly interesting time to enter the world of comics. I can appreciate that, Kari. You know, it really, Paul, that whole glut of chrome covers and the hologram covers and all that shit, I'm like, you know, I'm not buying baseball cards. I'm buying comics.
Right.
And I really felt like the storytelling was lacking. It was all about the art and very little about the story. and I checked out until people like you, when you were writing Spider-Man, and and the guys I mentioned at the beginning, Rucka, Bendis, Brubaker, all these guys and everything, and I that's what brought me back, because I heard, hey, you know what, Quesada just did, or rather, I'm trying to remember who did, well, it was Quesada and Kevin Smith. Hey, guess what? They're doing Daredevil, and it's almost as good as Frank Miller. And I'm like, well, I like Frank Miller Daredevil. Let me see what's going on. And that's when I discovered everybody.
Yeah, I think we did something that was worth it. I think the early 90s, I was largely an editor. And then really when I broke in, it was right after the industry imploded and Heroes World was Marvel's distributor. And then Capital City went out of business, and then Diamond was everyone else, and this thing was a mess, right? So I come in as a freelance creator at the moment where comics is at its lowest. The sales are really bad, no one likes it, no one wants it, any of that kind of stuff. And maybe it's probably as bad right now, I don't know. But it's a real low point. And one of the things that I felt I had seen, this is actually part of the conversation I was having with Alan, was, Alan, man, you do this stuff like Big Numbers and From Hell and Watchmen, and even when you do like DC comics, you do like Killing Joke and Watchmen, and these are great books, right? Why doesn't everyone do that? Why aren't books always like that? Because, they don't all have to be adult. They can still entertain younger audiences and still be cool, like Fairy Quest, maybe, you don't have to be grim and gritty to be interesting. You can just do that. You can do all these things. And a big thing for me when I was at Marvel was always single issues, right?
I remember.
You used to drive everyone crazy. You used to drive everyone crazy at DC and Hellblazer. But I think you should be able to walk in, pick up an issue, read it, make your judgment about whether or not you like that character or you understand it, and then move on, right? And that will bring in an audience. But at a certain point, it was like 5-issue series for trades, and you've got to do a deconstructed sort of 15-issue story. And I'm like, I don't get it, man. I hate it, frankly.
Well, I remember, like you said, I mean, some of your best Spider-Man stories were those one-shots. Always. And it's funny, you talk about the box in Deathmatch and everything. One of my favorite little novelties that you came up with was the story about, Peter Parker's piece of cheese that was fermented in his refrigerator.
That was great. You had no idea how many people would just come up to me. People would bring me cheese at convention, right? The best part about the cheese in Spider-Man, the cheese basically, for anyone that doesn't know, was like a little piece of cheese that he had kept in his fridge for so long that it had started growing mold on it, and he thought it was sentient, right? He was like, I'm cultivating this cheese. And it was this little joke he was playing with his roommate. And then in one issue, the cheese has a little like, it's dreaming, it's thinking of him, and he opens the fridge door and it has a little love emoji, and he's like, oh, and the cheese was called Kevin the cheese. And so he'd open the thing and the cheese would go, oh, it's my master. And then Peter would fish in the fridge, and then he would close the fridge door and the cheese would be all deflated and he'd have a little broken heart because he just wanted to. And people would come up to me about that cheese all the time and go, I love the cheese.
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, again, this is truly, Paul, you've always been an inventive writer. And honestly, whether it's your own creator-owned stuff or the established characters that you've worked on as well, not only for Marvel, but obviously DC with Hellblazer and Batman, things like that. Always great stuff, man. And here, more comments from everyone. Now, Ken, Paul, did kind of acknowledge this earlier, but I'll see if specifically, because it was an interesting wrinkle beyond what Paul did with the Sentry. He wants to know if you ever got any input on the dialogue Bendis had.
No.
Oh, I didn't remember this. Oh, forgive me, Paul. I thought it was about the Sentry. So he put you in New Avengers?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he put me in New Avengers. So the way this... No, I didn't get any input, and I could kill him for that because he made me look like a... It was really funny, right? So Brian
in what context? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, well, Brian called me up and he goes... He said he had just had a conversation with somebody and they were like, there are no great new characters. And he's like, that's bullshit. There are new characters. Look, Sentry, you got this, right? I want to bring him in. And he was trying to do the New Avengers, trying to make him mean something. And he said, like, the Sentry's perfectly a good character. Why aren't we doing anything with that, right? So he calls me up and he's like, I got this thing I want to do. It's his idea. I didn't have any, I think someone at one point was like, I had input into it. I'm like, no, it's Brian's idea, right? But he said, Paul, it'd be really good if basically he gets to meet his own creator, because that was the kind of story I did with my second run, right? It was very meta and it was very outside of comics, and it was all about like what makes us who we are. So he's like, I want him to meet you. So he makes me a character in a Marvel comic. The best part of it, though, is by the time Brian writes him, Brian, I'm going to give you shit. Because basically, Brian's as me talking like Dick Van, hello, governor, all right. And then when I meet the Sentry, I look at the Sentry and then faint and lay on the floor, having fainted, having met my own creation. I'm really scared and I'm really blubbery. And if I actually met the Sentry, if he walked in the front door, I'd be like, listen, man, I got a couple of ideas. Right. First of all, let's go for a beer.
Oh man, I'm sorry, I was talking over you. I assumed you said blimey, and then you fainted.
I think he has me. I think he has me saying blimey.
Oh God, Brian. He means
Brian.
well. You know, honestly, I thought he was going for what he did with Sentry in Dark Avengers, and I really appreciated Norman Osborn going to Bob Grayson and going, "Hey, we can handle this. I am living proof. I have a dark side, and I have it under control, and I'm going to help you handle your dark side." Yeah. And it made perfect sense for Bob Grayson to trust Norman Osborn.
I think the thing we did in the second series is something that I wish stayed with Marvel and should be part of the way Marvel does it. It's that when he becomes the Sentry, he doesn't cast a shadow, because at that same time, the Void manifests as well. He becomes two at the same time. So here's a creature of infinite darkness. Here's the guy who doesn't cast a shadow. So the Sentry becomes this amazing golden guardian of good, the standard of Superman of Supermans. But the Void exists at the same time. And one of the premises that we put up, which I think is actually useful to mine and to use and be part of the story, and maybe can make its way into the films, is that for everything the Sentry does that's good, the Void does something bad. So if the Sentry prevents a mine shaft collapsing in Poland, then the Void will take down a plane with 137 people in it to literally even things out. And that spoke to the original story I'd done, which is, they find out at the end that he is both the Sentry and the Void. And the reason there's so much damage to the world is because he's fighting himself. And so his act of bravery is a real superheroic act. He basically makes himself forget so that no one would die.
I love it. Absolutely, man. Here are more comments from the people. Ange says, really love Paul's run on Hellblazer and my top 2 writers for John. Love the addition of UK mythology like Green Man.
Yeah. So I just had a really good trip to LA. I was just out there, and one of the people, they're putting together a giant omnibus of Hellblazer. So everything that I did, plus some other stuff.
Beautiful.
And what's really cool about it, and I got a chance to meet with the editor, who's an old mate of mine, lovely guy, Alex Gaylor, and we've gone through it. And basically every single issue has a story behind it. For example, except maybe for the first 2 that were set in Australia, because I was taking the character over and they're like, can you write a couple in Australia? And I hadn't really planned for that, but I did the best I could. And it was probably for the best, because I don't know that they're that great of issues, but I was learning how to be a writer. It was my first gig. But the day that I got Hellblazer, the day that they told me, they called me up and they went, I know, basically I asked if I could write it. They said, write some sample scripts or whatever. And I wrote a sample script. And then they went, congratulations, you're the new writer of Hellblazer. And I'm like, great. So I thought that was really good, right? And then that day, my best friend Deanie was killed in a car crash, and one of my best friends. So he died that very same day.
Wow.
And so you had this mad thing. I'm like, what is happening?
Yeah.
And the first actual issue of mine is issue 91, which is the 3rd issue that came out. And it's all about Deanie. So every single episode, there's all these people that I know in Britain. Basically, Rich the Punk, who's this big character that was like a mainstay, is my brother. And all I would do, because I come from a family of lunatics, and so all I would do is just call my brother up and go, Rich, what are you up to? And he'd be doing something nuts. When I was over at the offices, I said, let's do something, and we'll call my brother. So we tried calling my brother and didn't pick up, which is a shame, because they would have understood why Rich the Punk exists. My brother only calls me, 3 or 4 hours later, and I'm like, what time is it over there? Right. Because at this point, it's like 6 o'clock in LA. So, the equivalent is like 2 a.m. and he's drunk off his ass going, I'm like, where were you earlier on? So.
That's fantastic, man. And Sean Phillips was your artist on Hellblazer?
Yeah, that's why I got so lucky in my career, right? Because I didn't know
Doesn't hurt.
anything. I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know how to do what I was doing. I was learning, and the person that I got that taught me how to do so much of it was Sean. I would write a thing, and it would be overwritten, and then I'd realize that art is telling. Over the course of the first 5 or 6, 7 issues that I did, I'm like, I get it. I'm not supposed to just write dialogue everywhere to explain it. The art shows it, because Sean was so brilliant at what he did.
That's fantastic, man. No, I truly, I wasn't putting 2 and 2 together, because I did read your Hellblazer. I didn't remember that Sean was the artist, and for me, it was him and Brubaker on Sleeper. That I'm like,
Yeah.
"Hey, who the fuck is this guy? Jesus,
Yeah, Sean's
Everything
amazing.
makes
Yeah,
sense. Yeah,
incredible. Yeah.
No, great team. No, fantastic team. And I feel for you guys that probably would love another bite of the apple with Sean and everything. And it seems like Ed's got his number right now, and that's pretty much it.
Well, that's good. They make a great team, so I could be nothing but happy for Sean and Brew, because they make this great team and they do really good books. I'd love to work with Sean again. I tell you, I just did talk to a couple of days ago. I was on my way out. It was Mark Buckingham. So he and I are talking about maybe doing something together again. We did 5+ years on Spider-Man, and we both miss it. So it'd be great to do something with him.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Absolutely, man. No, that was a great run on Spider-Man. Hell yeah. That's fantastic. Another comment from Kari. My glow-in-the-dark Ghost Rider Volume 3, Issue 15 is a grail that I finally got, and got Howard Mackie to sign. That's great. I drooled over it when I was a teen. Very cool. I'm going to be on Kari and her crew, their podcast Splash Pages next Tuesday.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about Kingdom Come, and we're going to talk about the Age of Ultron comic book series that Bendis did with Hitch. And right now I'm blanking on who the second arc artist was. But that'll be cool. And then you'll forgive me, Paul, mentioning Kingdom Come. A week from Saturday, we're going to have that Chicago premiere of the movie, making the Legend of Kingdom Come. I had the documentary title right. Nice. I'm one of the talking heads in it, and also while we were discussing, the producer Sal Abinati texted me, and I'll be conducting a Q&A on stage.
Wow.
So that'll be a lot of fun.
You're the perfect guy for it. That's good.
Thank you, mate. Well, I truly appreciate that, man. I'm excited. So there you go. Another Ange goes, love the poker game issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. There you go, man.
Yeah, that poker one, right? So here's the thing, Ange. I got this phone call, and it was from the World Poker Tour, right? And it turns out that Chris Moneymaker, the guy who was a nobody, and he had the best name in poker, Chris Moneymaker, and this guy had played his way into the tournament a number of years ago, right? I really liked poker. I thought poker was really great TV. And Moneymaker had played his way in. He was didn't even pay to get in there. He had paid a little bit of money and worked his way in, and he won the entire thing. And I'll never forget when he won it. I was watching it, and Moneymaker had, at one point, he just looked the other guy in the eye and he went, "I'm all in." And he had nothing. He had 7-2 offsuit. And he said, "I'm all in." And the other guy's like, "I don't know how to play this guy." The other guy folded with like a pair of aces because Moneymaker just did everything right. So now Moneymaker's been on the tour, and he finds the poker issue, and now he decides to tell everybody about the poker issue. So I get this phone call from the poker tour, and they're like, "Hey, can we do this thing where we talk to you and we do an article with you for Poker News about the poker issue?" Because the thing about that issue was that I pitched to my editor, look, the best conflict that I see, like good versus evil, is in a poker game. You watch TV poker, and it's like one guy acts like an ass to try to get under the skin of the other person. The other person's got ice water in his veins, pair of sunglasses on, just like staring at him. And it's this thing of a good guy and a bad guy. It's the black hat and the white hat, right? So they let us do it, and it was a really good issue in which the Kingpin shows up. And he just basically, they all play for $20 for charity, all the heroes. So you've got like Tony Stark, you've got Doctor Strange playing, you've got The Thing, you've got Spider-Man. They all chuck in $20, and then the winner gets to donate it to the charity they like, because they're all heroes. And Kingpin shows up with a suitcase of money and gives them all $1 million and says, "I'm going to win your $1 million back from you. And then I'm going to win your money. I'm going to buy myself an illegal Cuban cigar." Right? And he's horrible. And it comes down, and there are some really good things about that, right? So one thing that was really funny was that we had Doctor Strange playing poker, and he was really bad at it, which I thought was really a good touch, because he's the master of the arcane, and he'd go like, I've got like one pair, and is it queen high good? And they'd be like, listen, mate, you just fold, will you? And he's like, no, and he gets it wrong all the time. And so he wants to buy back in, and he goes, I want to buy back in, and he produces money from the air, and they're all talking to each other like, does he have a bank account? Like, what's, didn't think about that. And so it got to humanize these characters, but in the very end of it, it's Spider-Man facing across from the Kingpin, and they both go all in, and the Kingpin is so sure that he's won, and Spider-Man goes, I got two pair, and Kingpin's like, yeah, I beat you, right? And he goes, yeah, I got 2 4s and 2 more 4s, right? And then he takes all the money, and that was like, people come up to me all the time and go, that was so exciting, that issue, and nobody moves at all. Everyone sits around the table.
Did Bucky draw that one?
No. Who drew that? Wow, whoever wrote that.
Yeah, forgive me, everybody. Yeah,
tell me who drew that, because it was. And I feel awful.
Oh, here we go. Ange has it. Talent called.
Talent. Yeah, it was Talent. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I'm going to use my Marvel
Top
Unlimited.
Yeah.
I'm going to use my Marvel Unlimited and find that issue, man, because that
was a good one.
And I always loved those Thing poker games, back in the 70s and stuff. And,
so the Thing's in it, right? They're all in it, and they're doing their thing. I just love the banter that goes around the table as they're all like Doctor Strange is so shit at poker. He's like, and they're trying to go, look, man, how's he the master of arcane? He cannot play poker. It's great.
Dormammu found that out and wanted to challenge him into a no.
Yeah, there you go.
So I can appreciate that. That's fantastic, man. Too goddamn funny. All right, I'm not gonna. Oh well, I will acknowledge it. It's all right. Synchro Shadows Advance goes, hey, want to report on that truck accident on the Edens at 2E yesterday? Yeah, I used to be a radio traffic reporter. That's the inside joke there, Paul.
I got you.
I hope everyone's okay. That's all I'll say. I left that world goddamn 5 years ago during COVID. That's when they downsized me because nobody was on the roads, so they had to eliminate. They had to eliminate half the staff.
What's your report going to be? There were no accidents today. It feels like. For a while, I thought this was really sweet. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but Minecraft used to have these little videos they would make with the little Minecraft characters, and it would be the villagers, and they would do villager news. So they would cut to the villager, and he'd go like, "Hello, villager number 7 with villager news, and this is villager number 7, and we're going to go over to villager number 13." And they cut to 13, and he'd just be standing there saying, "Hi, villager number 13," and he'd sort of look around and goes, "There's a tree behind me," and then they cut back. It was like a wasteland. It was great.
No, man, absolutely. No, broadcasting is very fair to make fun of. So I can.
I got to ask the question. You remember WKRP in Cincinnati, which is an old TV show, but Les Nesbitt, the reporter, used to do his traffic report, and he would stand there and go, "Well, I'm flying up above the city."
Yes. It's all right, and sadly, I have a real world kind of example like that.
Oh yeah.
We for weather reports, they got us this very techno sounding sounder. And they're like, all right, when you do weather, this is in Bloomington, Illinois, everybody. Right. So Central Illinois, this little number 2 station in a 3-station market. And they're like, all right, to jazz up our weather, we got this sounder. Refer to the weather as the sky scan forecast. They're like, we don't have a machine. We just have the sounder.
We have the sky scan forecast.
Okay, here's the sky scan forecast. It'll be cloudy tomorrow with a high of 45.
Yeah.
And seriously, I'm like, sky scan forecast. I'm like, shouldn't we call it eyewitness weather? If you're going to call it the sky scan forecast. I'm like, so yeah, sadly, man, that's why I love Hugh Wilson, the guy who created WKRP. He was an old radio guy. So he took all of his old stories and made the sitcom out of it and stuff. No, one of my favorite sitcoms.
I felt bad when I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio, because that is where the jet stream goes up and down, right?
Oh, I didn't know that.
They would say, well, tomorrow it's going to be like 83 degrees, and then the next day it would be 45 degrees. They'd miss it by literally 30 or 40 degrees because it would have jumped up and down and they couldn't see it coming. And I felt bad. Like we were right on the place where it could just go within 40 degrees in a day,
Absolutely. Well, Chicago just has that weather because of Lake Michigan, the lakefront. And we will start at like 70 degrees, and by nighttime it might be 45, and that happens especially early baseball season. And you'll get to Wrigley when it's still sunlight and be like, all right, it's 65. It's cool. And then by the 9th inning, it's 40 degrees.
Oh, I've done it, mate. I've done it. And it is.
Yes,
it's
I'm
freezing.
sure. Oh, yeah.
It's Melbourne in Australia as well. It's 4 seasons in one day, they always say it. And it's like I went out to play golf over there and I sort of drive the ball and then I'm walking down, I'm thinking, there's a parakeet right there and there's a kookaburra up in the tree right there. And a little while later it rains and I'm freezing. Now the sun comes out and I'm like exploding. You know, it's crazy out there.
Jeez. I gotta tell you, as a footballer yourself, I got a great education watching Ted Lasso because I'll be honest, Paul, I was never really into soccer, but I'll admit, man, that fucking show, it sucked me in and I'm like, that's really cool.
Do you know where it was shot?
Tell me. Oh, wow, look at that.
So I'm a lifetime Crystal Palace guy. That's my team. We just made the FA Cup final, so we're on just 7th heaven right now, but it's all shot at Selhurst Park.
I had no idea. That's fantastic, man.
That's our place right there.
And now I am the biggest Greg Goldstein fan, the guy who played Roy Kent.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I've always tangentially been aware of great sports stories, no matter what the sport.
Oh, you know who Roy Kent is, right? You know who he is in real life.
No,
he's
tell
Roy
me
Keane.
who's based on.
He's Roy Keane. He used to play for Manchester United. Roy Keane was a nutter. And him and Vinnie Jones, who used to play for Wimbledon, who ended up becoming an actor, they used to go at it. And it just in those days, they used to like try to take each other's kneecaps off. Roy Keane went from being that guy and then he became a pundit on TV and he just had no filter. So Roy Kent, anyone that watches football is like, oh, it's Roy Keane. That's what it's supposed to be, yeah.
No, that makes sense. That makes a shit ton of sense and everything. And I knew Vinny's former career and everything as a footballer. So
I love how we're talking about nothing to do with comics. It's fantastic. We always do this.
Come on, man.
Sorry.
You know, that's word balloon. 20 years of this shit, man. And you know what's great? I hope it happens to you next time you're at a convention. A fan of a mutual fan of ours will come up to you and go, hey, man, that was really fun that you were talking about, whether it was your article in the poker magazine or.
I can bring it back to comics. I can bring it back to comics in one way, which is when I was doing, at a certain point, you're doing like Origin of Wolverine, you're writing Spider-Man, you got the Hulk as well. Yeah. You're doing all kinds of stuff. And at the time, I was writing Flogging a Dead Horse because I was getting married to my wife and we were about to have our firstborn, right? And I would go to conventions and they would, people would line up to talk about the Origin of Wolverine. You'd be in this big auditorium and there'd be a few thousand people in there and you'd sort of sit there and they go, I just want to ask you, how's your cat feeling? And I'd be, what? And they go like, yeah, because I know your cat wasn't well. I'm like, yeah, I put that in flogging. So I'd say, yeah, my cat's doing fine. Thanks very much. He was just sick for one day and he's all good now. The next person would come up. They'd ask me about Nigh Perfect. And then the next person, and you'd be like, none of you are talking about comics. You're all talking about like something completely different. Huh?
Well, that's the thing, man. No, and again, that's always my greatest compliment when creators will go, hey, man, I was in Australia and, the person knew that I like to put chips in a bottle and then spent 5 minutes talking about chips in a bottle with the guy at the convention and they must have heard it on your show. And I'm like, when? So that's cool. By the way, Kari mentioned, and I do want to promote this on Splash Pages, you will be a guest on the 20th.
Right.
So there you go. Absolutely. Thank you, Kari, because actually one of Kari's co-hosts told me that as well because he's like, like I said, I'm going to be on their show next week. And I said, I got Jenkins tonight. He's like, oh, yeah, we got Jenkins later this month. So there you go, man.
Ask me difficult math problems, Kari. I'm sure I can solve them. Yeah. Don't do that. And
Synchro goes, in regards to superheroes and supervillains doing normal activities, what other activities would you love to see, I guess, in superhero or supervillain, stories?
Well, actually, if there are things I'd like to say, I probably wrote them. I used to write ordinary stuff. The one thing we've talked about this before, John, I'm sure, right? But, I have this particular issue that I always point to with Spider-Man, which is issue where he goes to a baseball game. And it's very meaningful. It certainly came in my life. It was part of my life. I wrote the issue for a very specific reason. And, I think that
it's okay.
I'm getting a visitation.
No, we love when
Claudius, cool. My cat.
It's
Claudius,
cool. Oh, good. And it's good that the cat's there.
He's just making a lot of noise. Here he is.
It's all right. What's his cat?
Claudius.
There you go.
My little buddy.
Fantastic.
Anyway, so I wrote that story about baseball, And I always have to explain to people who love it and revere that issue, like it only has one panel in which he's dressed as Spider-Man. It's the story of a little boy and his father figure going to a baseball game and what it meant to them and why they connected. And people will come up to me with that issue and they will cry their eyes out. They're like, this from, you know, and it was written as I went to go see my grandfather. And as he passed away, literally, I saw him, and having to go to Britain and then fly away means I say goodbye and they're not gone yet, right? And so it's very hard. And I got on the plane. I wrote the issue just as he passed away. I almost knew it. And I wrote it on the plane all the way back. So understanding that, like the ordinary, what normal activities I want to do, I always had them doing normal activities. I think, you know, you have these super people with their super stuff, but the things that people remember from my runs on anything are all the other stuff. I wrote Spider-Man largely comedic at times. Yeah. I remember when we did Spectacular, he lived across the street from this girl who, let's be clear, was probably obviously an exotic dancer. And she was in love with him. She just used to flirt with him all the time. He didn't know what to do about it. And she had a dog there called Barker that everybody loved. And basically Barker was the only person that knew he was really Spider-Man. So the dog would stand on the balcony and he'd come out of his apartment, look around, and he'd be like, the dog would just be staring at him, and then he'd go off to be Spider-Man. And he was convinced that Barker was building something inside, because the dog would look at him and then go inside. There'd be the sound of like hammering and banging, and then the dog would come back out again, right? That dog was literally around the corner from Night Perfect tonight. He was a dog that we used to see. We'd walk our dog every day, and he used to go nuts at the fence. And then one day, as he's going nuts, he's a big Rottweiler, and the fence opened, and now he had everything he wanted. And he looked around him and he's like, I don't know what to do now. And he just stayed stock still, and we kind of very quietly went, you know, and then once we closed the fence, that's when he went nuts again. So I think writing the ordinary is the thing that we all recognize. And I always write the ordinary and then happen to put these heroes in some other situation.
Well, it's the humanity behind the heroics, and no, I'm with you, man. It's those great Wolverine issues where he and Nightcrawler are at a bar just talking,
Yep.
you know, things like that. No, absolutely, man. Well, and you know, to quote our friend Bendis, he's like, you know, and good Claudius, good for you,
Claudius. You know, a bit of a sit.
Bendis always said, you know, hey, we've seen the same fight scene a million times. What we haven't seen are good conversations. And yeah, man, whether it's hero to hero or villain to villain or hero to villain, that's when the real characters come out. And also, because of the continuity that goes back, you know, DC 80 years, Marvel 60 years, 60 plus years, it's like, no, these guys do know each other by then. And I bet you put Hammerhead and Spider-Man together, it would be like, all right, it's your bullshit again. And I always point to when Grant Morrison wrote a Fantastic Four mini, and it was Dr. Doom and the Thing. And, you know, and he's just grim, and he's just rolling his eyes at Grim. And the same time, Ben's like, you know, Vic, you were a piece of shit in college, and you're a piece of shit now. And it's like, yeah, that's what, because again, we've been on that ride with these people. So yeah, we're into the fact that, you know, they know each other, and at this point, they should be like, it's this motherfucker again. Fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It's just ordinary stuff about ordinary people. I love that stuff, right? Yep. That's actually what we write about. I'll never forget that Greg Rucka wrote probably the comic that I would point to as my favorite comic that anyone else has ever read, ever written. And it's basically a guy who messes up from the Kingpin. He messes up, and he knows he's messed up, and they come to get him, and he knows he's going to die. And he says goodbye to his wife, and he says goodbye to his kids. He's like, I'll see you later, but he knows what's happening. And he walks into the Kingpin, and he says, look, I know what this is. I guess I want to ask you one thing, if I can, please. I've always done my best. I know what you have to do right now, but I've always done my best, and I'm going to ask you, please, would you mind sparing my wife and children, because I did everything I was supposed to, and then the Kingpin allows it. That story is so human and so straightforward, and it's really just this thing. It doesn't have any other characters in it as the Kingpin in it. You know,
that's right. Yeah, Tangled Web. It was an issue of that fantastic series, Tangled Web, and the title of the story was Severance Package.
Okay, love that, right? Love that. And our Tangled Web one, I just saw J.G. Jones. I did a couple with Sean. It's what got me into Spider-Man, really, because it got me to want to write it. And the one I did with J.G. was so special. It was all about I had said for a couple of years I couldn't write Spider-Man. I talked to Ralph a few times, Ralph Macchio, couldn't write it, didn't know what to write. I didn't understand the continuity. I don't know enough about comics. And then I thought the story needs to be that Spider-Man throws away the stuff that traps him, all this continuity. So he would go through it, and they were all comic panels that had him trapped, and he would cast them away by reliving it. So it was the death of this and the death of that. And in the end, he ends up on a rooftop, and it's just him, the Goblin, the Vulture, the Sandman, and all the original, and he's just having the time of his life. And then they disappeared, and he goes back to the core of everything, because Gwen Stacy walks out, and he says, "I want to stay with you," and she says, "You can't. You have to wake up." And it's like heartbreaking, right? But it's about nothing,
Yeah, I'm going to reread that now that you told me that. That sounds amazing, man. Jesus.
You got to read the two that come before it. There's two that I did with Sean just before it.
All right, no worries. I will. That sounds great, man. Now you see, everyone with Marvel Unlimited, that's what you got to do. These are homework assignments. So, or if you have DC Universe, look up Paul's Hellblazer stuff. Any memories about Batman Jekyll and Hyde? Another cool mini with great art, Jay Lee and Sean Phillips, and also he says love Two-Face and thought that was a great story for him. I completely agree, but I have to remind you, Paul, Batman never sits down.
God, don't even. You
Sorry.
get me in trouble if you do that. But
yeah, all right, exactly. Look that up, kids.
If Batman doesn't sit down, then how does he drive his car, for God's sake? Or look at the computer in the back.
Paul, it was truly the
weird.
Greatest redemption, because not only you, but there was an editor, if everyone doesn't know the story, that told Paul, I'm telling it, and he'll correct me if I get these wrong, but he wrote a scene and Batman never sits down. And all these memes on social media, thank God in this case for social media, because everyone is showing comic book panels and cartoon images.
Sitting down. I think in The Killing Joke, don't they sit down for a while, the two of them?
Well, yeah, when he at the beginning of the story, when he's like, look, one of us is going to die if we don't stop doing this dance and everything. So no, Jesus, Paul, he's in front of the back computer. He's Adam West sat down. It's like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
Anyways, wrong. So Batman Jekyll and Hyde was something that I did with Two-Face, because I always want to get to the why, right? And the why is the only reason you can do a story. I don't care about the fact it's got robots in it or laser beams or Batman or any of that stuff. There's no story there unless you know why you're telling it. And for me, you don't go crazy like Two-Face did because someone splashed you with acid. You don't go nuts. You get injured. Your face hurts and you get a scar, right? So there had to be something under there that was ready. That was catalyzed by this thing that happened to him where he lost half his face. And so we wrote the story, so I don't spoil it for anyone that would like to read it. We wrote the story that kind of shows you why he became Two-Face, like what was really going on with him and why he split into two people. And when you read and find out that these two people are two people, you're like, oh my God, that's different, right? So I was just talking about that when I was over at DC the other day, and they were like, yeah, it was canon at the time, so potentially, okay, spoiler alert, because it's probably not too much, but basically we had the idea that he had an older brother called Murray, and that Murray was evil and he was a little pyromaniac, and so this half that's broken is Murray, and he's messed up, and this half that's okay is Harvey, but Harvey is losing to Murray.
I love too. Go ahead. Excuse me.
I was going to say it meant something, right? It meant something to the character. It meant that, I get it. I understand why he's so sad and why he's so messed up and why his life is broken. It's like that because understandably he went through this tragic thing with his brother, and this event really shaped him, and it made him question who he is and did he do the right thing by his brother and what happens and what's the nature of evil. So now it's just manifesting on his face because he realized that he thinks this half is Murray.
That's amazing. I also appreciate it, and I believe it was your story and it was when you were doing that Batman book for the New 52 years, and or a year. I don't know how long you were on.
About a year, I think, yeah.
About a year. And the opening, and again, this is another one of those great relationships because before he went nuts, Harvey and Bruce were, I should say Harvey and Batman were allies. And I forget the reasons why Batman has to leave Gotham, but he's like, Harvey, you love this city as much as I do. I need you to protect Gotham the way I would. because
Right.
you're the only guy I can trust to do that.
There's villains, right, are terrible when they twirl their moustache and stand like a Laurel and Hardy villain. And they say, "I'll get you, my pretty," right? That doesn't mean anything. What you got to do with a villain is understand that you could probably even agree with some of the things that they might be saying. But you don't agree with any of their methods. And so, if you can write it where they really think they are the hero of their own story. And then there are a few that just are not, and they know it, right? So there are a few Ted Bundys maybe that are broken, and then so just psychotic. And then there are a few that just really are bad people, and they know they're bad people, and they're going to be bad people, and that's how they operate. And there's no particular thing behind them except narcissism, and that's Dr. Octopus, right? Like, he's got no sense of humor. He's not very nice. He's unpleasant. He has no ulterior motive except the fact that he's a control freak and a narcissist.
Well,
but
also,
they're still meaningful.
Yeah, again, I go back to the Killing Joke at the end of the story. It always, I listen. I respect Alan Moore's wishes, and if there are things about the story he doesn't like, I get it. But the one part that I always liked, and everyone points to, the last joke and the raindrops and did Batman kill him or whatever? It's called the Killing Joke. What I like is before all that, and Batman's like, "Hey, please let me help you."
Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, it doesn't have to be this way. And the Joker, in a very honest moment, goes, "No, this is who I am.
Yeah.
I can't change."
Yeah, I'd written a scene very similar to that, although, and the reason I bring it up is because people are like, "That's like the Killing Joke." I'm like, it's not the Killing Joke, right? Just because Spider-Man and the Goblin end up in this big, intense story where the Goblin takes a side to Peter's life apart. He gets Flash drunk forcibly and then makes him crash his truck into Peter's school, things like that. And in the end, they are in a warehouse, and the Goblin says, if you want to get out of here, you have to kill me. It's the only way you can get out of here. And if you don't get out of here, I'm going to kill your family. So you make a choice. And if you kill me, you'll become me. I'll have what I want, right? There's a really good dilemma. And then they end up just smacking the crap out of each other. And then they end up, just like in Killing Joke, they end up sitting down and just going like, what? Now, what are we going to do? Right? Like, we can't do this. So what are we going to do? And for 4 pages, they just sit there and talk. And that, to me, is more action in those 4 pages of dialogue. You learn everything, right? First of all, the first thing that the Goblin says, they sit there and they're just exhausted, don't know what to do. And the Goblin just says, I wasn't going to call myself the Green Goblin. I was going to call myself Mr. Coffee. And they don't know what to do. And they just both start cracking up, right? And then when they got down, they have this in-depth conversation because they realize they're at an impasse. And they talk about it and they sort of say, look, I can't kill you, because if I do that, then Gwen wouldn't have liked it. And I don't care about you. I care about what Gwen thinks. Right. And then the Goblin realizes he's lost forever. He can never win. And so we had this stuff. The way that book was originally written, there was you pull out from the book. I'm not sure if it stayed in there. I don't think so. You pull out from the book and then the pigeons are outside Norman Osborn's room. And then you hear bang and the pigeons fly away.
Wow.
But I think they didn't put that in the book. I can't remember.
All right. Well, by the way, Spider-Man Crawlspace says that Spidey Goblin story was epic. Loved it. So there you go, man.
Thank you. Yeah.
There you go. And Synchro says, I think John did that a bit with Earth One's incarnation of Jeff Johns of Two-Face. Okay. All right. That's cool. And says, I have a very technical question for Paul in regards to in-depth conversations for these characters. How do you make it compelling, true to the character, while avoid it being overly expositional?
Okay. Yeah, because that's okay. That's a good question, because I don't think the exposition has to live there at all, right? Look, when I teach at college, I say this thing about audacity, right? You want to be a writer, be audacious, like have some nerve, right? What's audacious in a comic? I know exactly where I can go to this, because I bet we've talked about this in the past, John. People always ask me, well, how did you manage to do the Inhumans and make them successful? And then why haven't they really been that way since, right? Like, how is it that you and Jay did this one thing and then no one else did it? And I actually have an answer for that. When I came into Marvel, I didn't know anything about Marvel characters at all. Like, I didn't know anything. I knew Spider-Man existed, and I think he fought the Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus. That's it. I knew the Fantastic Four, and I really liked The Thing when I was a little kid, but we couldn't get comics, so I didn't know that much about it. I knew the Hulk, and that's it. I don't think I knew anything else about. I didn't know the Avengers. I didn't know anything, right? I didn't know any of those characters. So if you kind of go around in a circle, I come into Marvel and they send me these couple of Jack Kirby stories to look at. They're just 5 pages each, and I write the entire series from those. And one of the things that they said was Black Bolt can't speak, because if he speaks, then stuff blows up. And I realized that every time before and after I did the Inhumans with Jay, like, we had him not speak. And so about 8 or 9 issues in, he's under attack and he's going to lose everything. And he doesn't say a word. He just stands staring out of his window. And people were writing in going, why isn't he going to do something? Why doesn't he say something? He could just get rid of him if he spoke. And I'm like, that's the point of the character. He can't speak. It's a metaphor for when a leader like the king or the president speaks his mind too much, which I think people see in politics at the moment. People they've lost the rules now, right? Like, now it creates a constitutional crisis, you know? And so, you know, we took the character and made it true because he didn't speak. That's what's bold, is not having speak. So how do you make the conversations compelling? You make the conversations, you don't try to use them to drive the exposition. You take if your story needs 2 people sitting in a coffee shop for 4 pages talking because that's what the story needs, then write that. And if they're just talking about the thing that might be interesting and they're passing the time away, that's because that's what human beings do. And we recognize ourselves in these characters if they're human. But if they're constantly running into battle with a stogie in their mouth and slamming people with a machine gun and then punching everybody and killing 100 people with just one swipe, it's like, none of us have ever done that, so we don't care. So how do you keep the conversations compelling? You write them honestly, is the answer.
Excellent. Again, Paul's writing seminars at conventions. I can attest to them. And I don't know if you have any plans to go to any conventions in the near future.
You know, it'd be good to do some writing seminars. I teach at times down at the film studios down nearby, and I'm going to probably be doing something with them this summer. I like to teach because I like to learn, and I think you can't teach unless you learn as you go. But these great questions, like, you know, how do you make it compelling? You make it compelling by being honest is the answer. And so I have to think about that, and then I learn from it, right? It's a good question.
Fair enough. A couple comments from Spider-Man Crawlspace. He says, I'd also love to see, he'd like to see you do a few more Spidey stories. Bring back Marker.
That's the dog.
Absolutely. Cool. And he also said, I love Paul's Fairy Quest series. And we did mention it earlier, but I'll let you tell him, are there plans?
Yeah, like Fairy Quest has been a labor of love and hate, I think. Yes, there's going to be an issue 4. The problem has always been that every one of the 3 iterations of Fairy Quest have been challenging, right? Every time the fulfillment and shipment was messed up, not by me, but by somebody else that came in and helped us. And even the last one, I just couldn't believe that it got, basically somebody that was working on it with us, essentially marked up a bunch of books that were shipped that weren't, and marked up a bunch of books that weren't shipped that were. So we were double shipping sometimes, and some people were not getting them, and we had no idea who had what, because we only inherited. So by the time I came in to clean the mess up for the 3rd time, we had a mess that we didn't know how to solve. There's no way to solve it. We sent out every book as far as we know. We couldn't even guess if people were saying I didn't get one. And I'm like, at a certain point, you just can't say you didn't get one. I know I sent you one. Some people do stuff like that. So we were just like, what do we do? Yes, there'll be a 4th one, but it wasn't much fun.
I'm sorry, man. That was a Kickstarter, right?
Yeah, they were Kickstarters, all 3 of them. And every single time it would go to crap.
Damn.
Like, this is crazy.
That sucks, man. Oh, that's Jesus. Synchro says he appreciates the depth of your answer. He's always wanted to write Aquaman and Green Arrow in a manner that delves into their psyches and mindsets. As a teacher, that was awesome. There you go, man. Again, as I said, I sitting through, and I've always got my ideas for comics, but I've never really done them. But truly, you, Barbara Kiesel would give good seminars. Mark Wade would good.
Yeah, Mark gives really good ones. Yeah.
So no, I appreciate guys like you that beyond writing can teach it.
There's so much to learn, but even if you go outside of it, I think there are 2 things, which is the craft of storytelling in comics you know, how panels juxtapose against each other, why we write them that way, what it is we're trying to do with each page, how we're trying to create a story, how we're doing sequential narrative that ends episodic and then it ends at a certain point. If you're doing that kind of thing, there's that. But the stuff that I like the most and the stuff that I think is most important and interesting is the storytelling side of it. Tell me why. Let me know that you understand why your story deserves to exist and what you're trying to do here. And if you can fit that into the form, then you're going to win. I maintain, even though I'm naive, I still maintain that really, really good quality content will win out, and stuff that's barely. I can honestly say I've ended up in conversations with people professionally who have told me that they just start writing and find out what happens when they go. And I'm like, I can't imagine doing something like that.
Wade does that a lot. Wade has told me that he'll put, like he said, I'll put somebody in a back seat with nobody driving the car and they're about to go off a cliff. Well, how's he gonna get out of that? I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. I'll figure it out.
It's interesting. It's just people do it all differently, right? You know, and I don't do that much because I want to know why I'm telling the story and what it really means in the end. Because I feel like when you craft it like that, then I know that I personally can get something out of it that will move. That my job. I'm not a writer. I'm an emotions engineer. I engineer people's emotions remotely. I write a thing that creates an idea. I get a comic book. The art may look different from the script, and I re-dialogue it to make the dialogue work. And at that point, I send it out in the world, and we hope that we've set a bomb that sends off somebody's emotions in some way.
That's great. You know, I think the last time we spoke was during the actor and writer strikes that the studios were facing, and I was wondering how it was impacting Atlanta. So yeah, tell me now, even though we're only a year and a half since, you know, how are things going?
Yeah, it's not just the strike. I mean, now you got the voice actor strike as well, and I got a lot of friends, very dear friends, who I've voice directed before, and are voice actors. And I just was at the premiere with Yuri Lowenthal, the voice of the Spider-Man games, right? Yuri's a dear friend of mine, longtime friend, and he and his wife Tara, who is also a voice actor, have done great. They're like the cutest couple in LA, right? And there's Claudius. He's going to just hang out there and just get his face on camera the whole time.
Yeah, it's great.
That's what he does. So here's what's really happened and is happening with film at the moment. It's very difficult, right? There was COVID. And in COVID, there wasn't live action production. And so what was happening is a lot of stuff was being stockpiled and not necessarily being produced. Because of that, there was a massive backlog of stuff that was all under contract that was getting produced, right? So now you have this glut of stuff. Well, at a certain point, that means that nobody's writing. And then when nobody's writing, they don't know what to do, you know, no one's creating, no one's developing. But usually there's the production cycle and then there's development cycle. So when production goes down, development takes over, and then it goes like that, right? Didn't happen this time. And then there's all these other factors. Suddenly there was the writer's strike, then the actor's strike. So that messed up development and that messed up production. And then there's the advent of AI. And that's a fascinating conversation, especially to have someone like me, because I've got some thoughts on it that aren't necessarily the norm for a particular reason. So AI has made a big difference because all the studios were like, it's not going to make any difference. We're not going to use AI to replace people. And now I've heard a few producers that are complaining, we're getting cut out. And I'm like, you're the people that do the cutting out. Now you're worried because you're getting cut out by the studios, because guess what? The studios make a load of money. They send the dividends to their They don't have, I was on a panel today when Van Jensen was talking about this and saying that, you know, the studios don't have like tons of money sitting in their pockets to make more films. Once they've made all that money, they send it out as dividends to their investors and their shareholders.
Absolutely.
So now there's no business there at the moment. There's no business of content creation. That's a weird thing to happen when people want content. But, you know, if you can make a YouTube channel for free and people will watch that, then they're not watching your film.
I understand, man. No, and I get it. And also, you know, talking to guys like my buddy Mark Guggenheim, and he and Kari Andrews are going to come back next week, and we're going to have a new conversation. But he's kind of one of my screenwriter buddies that I'll, you know, take.
Mark Guggenheim's a lovely guy. Love Mark. Really nice guy. You have to say hi for me if you can remember, because I really remember. I enjoyed knowing him when I didn't. I haven't spoken to him in years. Yeah.
Let's see. A couple comments from Kari. Kari says, I sometimes do developmental editing. Once I suggested to a writer that if they wanted a character to be allowed into a particular guild, they may not accept him because he was filthy and poorly clad. I have been thinking maybe if he got a shower. It's crazy how some writers' minds work. I love it. And let's see here. Mine does the same when I'm writing as well. All right. I don't know if that's an independent thought or not, but no, you're right, man. And it's true. I get hit up with, I got a great idea for Spider-Man. And it's like, you got to write your own thing.
Yeah. If you have a great idea for Spider-Man or whatever, no matter what great idea you have, tell me why, right? Tell me why it deserves to live and tell me what it's actually about. Because if your idea is that this robot attacks another robot and laser beams fly around and you're like, great, that's a thing that happened, but that's not a story. If you can tell me that the robot means this and this is how it learns, or this is what happens and this is the human effect and this is what moves my emotions, I get it then, right? So you don't need robots and lasers. They're great for window dressing. You need like superheroes and fighting for American comics, right? But that's not what the story should be about.
I get it. Absolutely, man. No, I'm with you. Synchro says that Kurt Vonnegut had a prophetic premiere novel about the labor transformation into machinery and AI called Player Piano. Highly recommended. I remember that quite well in the 70s when I was reading Kurt Vonnegut as a child. So I know exactly what you mean, man. Kurt Vonnegut knew what was going on, man.
Here's an interesting thing for AI. So
tell me, yeah. I really want to know what you think.
Well, okay. So my job isn't comics, right? I just have done lots of them, and I like doing comics, and I think they're a great way to tell any story. They're so good, but I'm disappointed in some ways that the American audiences don't necessarily embrace what Europeans embrace. You know, there's not as many people reading crime comics. There's not as many people reading these other things that are really interesting, right? Mysteries and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
And so we're in this place where I see this knee-jerk reaction from artists and writers. And I understand the knee-jerk reaction because my best friends are artists in this business. And it is wrong for someone to take their stuff and scrub the internet for their work and then use it, right? That is so wrong. But AI isn't the problem. Like NFTs were not the problem. And it doesn't matter if you're upset about NFTs being stupid. NFTs aren't stupid. Crypto bros suck. Crypto bros are what made NFTs seem bad. But NFTs themselves are a fundamentally useful technology that are like a key that opens the door to any number of things, including commerce. NFTs are used every day by Walmart and companies like that. You have NFTs in your life, whether you like it or not, because they're a fundamentally useful technology. Not liking NFTs is a little bit like not liking DVDs. It's just a tool, right? AI, unfortunately, my opinion, and I'm open to the debate. I love my friends who are artists, so I'm going to defend them to the hilt. They should not be stolen from. But AI is a tool. It's a hammer. My college lecture goes like this: give a hammer to a little monkey, and the monkey's going to hit himself over the thumb with it. Give a computer to a monkey and he's going to hit himself over the thumb with it. Or he might type the complete works of William Shakespeare. It's one of those two, right? So we are just like sophisticated monkeys with sophisticated tools. And we're going to smack ourselves over the thumb with it a lot of times. That's what NFTs did. That's what AI is doing. But AI is a useful tool for things like, like helping something get quicker, for example. Here's why AI can't win. AI can't do what I do. So I'm not afraid of AI. Go ahead and write a script with an AI. Go for it. I'm not afraid of you. Here's a script that I'm going to write. I'm going to write two characters like Shaun of the Dead, and they're going to sit down on a sofa and something funny just happened. And then they're going to turn to each other and look. And that they share that look and we cut. An AI can't write that because it has none of that experience, doesn't know what to write. It cannot write that moment because it hasn't lived that moment. It's just mathematically plotting what it thinks you might do and say. It doesn't know that, right? So it can't compete with me. But I think what's going to happen with AI is you're already seeing the signs that the studios are basically like, we're not going to replace people with AI as they replace people with AI. The studios for a long time have felt just fine in providing this weird, homogenized form of vaguely interesting entertainment in the form of some of their blockbusters, right? So they do it and the public buy it and they go, great, look at us, we're clever. So they're buying it. So we must be great. So we're just going to keep doing that. And if I can get a film made for 30 million that used to cost me 150 million, then I'll just use AI to do it. And that sounds good, but ultimately they're going to end up with homogenized crap that basically people won't like. And on the other side, there's going to be those of us who make it. The independent filmmakers are going to make great stories and art. And that's really human and it speaks to us. So it's going to be us versus them, and we're going to win.
Paul, I've basically been saying a lot of the similar things to my friends that are worried, especially writers, because there are kernels of character that you can convey that, as you say, the AI isn't going to think of it. Even if you say, spit out a Batman story. Well, and a better example is Superman. And I said this to Azzarello, because Azzarello, yeah, we're all going to get fucked by AI. And I'm like, Brian, you wrote a Superman story where he had a crisis of conscience and a crisis of faith. That For Tomorrow story he did with Jim Lee.
Yeah.
And Superman goes to the priest and it's like, I don't know what to believe anymore. And it's like, an AI can't think of that. Or, I mean, and that it is that kind of humanity that you guys.
It could, but it can only approximate what someone might think of that. It can't write the nuance. It can't do the stuff that's really human that we relate to.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna worry so much about AI. I do worry about the income streams of my friends at this moment. I think the next few years are going to be this battleground, unfortunately, and so that's sad, right?
I agree.
But I think people will hate it. I think when you look at something like Midjourney, you take Midjourney, you're like, hey, can I have a wallpaper for a background for my PowerPoint? I'm like, great,
sure,
do it, right? Like, I mean, and so here's another unpopular argument. I don't know if it's unpopular, but hopefully people understand. I think about this and do this all the time. I talk about these because I work in new technologies and storytelling across different media. That includes NFTs, includes how AI and machine learning works, right? Just part of my company. So if you look at like the processes, AI is just an approximation of things that might happen and then it aggregates and then puts them together. If we want to suggest what might happen, AI might be useful if you say, can you give me 30 ideas for a thing? It might give you 30 ideas that probably will do this. It'll give you 30 ideas and you won't use any of them, but you might go, you know what, that gives me an idea. But that's like talking to somebody. It's just like talking to somebody that gives you a couple of ideas.
Sure.
So I submit that we've been using stuff, and this is why I'm a bit upset about artists and writers just getting on the bandwagon and going, I hate AI, I hate AI. And I'm like, well, where were you when soft synthesizers were created that would approximate a trombone so perfectly that you could play the trombone even if you never learned to play the trombone? If you can sequence the MIDI and move the stuff and pretend that you're breathing, you've been approximated. So where were you in defense of the musicians that needed defending because their livelihoods were at threat? I love you. I want you to be okay. But I want you to remember that this is the advance of technology. And so I want everyone to be okay. I don't want anyone to be stolen from, but you weren't there when music was being changed. You weren't there when this was being changed and when that was being changed. And so, now lots of musicians can play the trombone and the saxophone, and I can just dial it up on my keyboard and I can get whatever I want, right? But am I wrong to do that? Because I didn't hear anyone telling me that was a bad thing to do. So then when you see other people maybe, doing stuff with writing or whatever, I guess my stuff has been fed into, I can see there's a thing that allows you to see whether your work has been fed in. My stuff has been fed in. I'm like, good luck with that.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, Paul. I should ask you. I've had AI companies go, hey, do you want to put your interviews in our database and we'll pay you X? And I'm like, or we might pay you as much as X, not even a guarantee. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah. They'll steal it anyway, right? They'll go do
it. But literally, Paul, that is my quandary. And I'm like, yeah, you're gonna find it online anyway, and maybe lift things from it. Christ, I keep friends of mine that are really into library sciences and information will do searches for me and go, well, this is what ChatGPT spit out when I asked who was John Suntress.
Yeah, right.
And they get a lot right. They also said I was an animator from the East Coast. and cut my teeth there and everything. And it's like, no. But then it said, as I always say, the robots must like me, because it said very flattering things about my podcast and about my radio career. And it's like, oh, all right. Well,
AI must be comic book reporters then.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me, Paul, if some of these websites are not churning out AI, conceived articles and things. And yeah, man, I don't know. And I hear you, and I agree with you. And in fact, I am trying to become more adept at AI tools that will help me do what I do better and faster. And there's even something I use to make video shorts, and I'll even share it with everybody. It's called Opus Clip, and they promote the shit out of it on Instagram and Facebook and everything. And it's a nice shortcut to give me ideas of highlights. I mean, I'm even doing it myself, and when I'm mostly talking to everybody, but it's a nice added tool of suggestion. I don't agree with a lot of the edits it makes, but it like you said, it's like, oh, well, actually, no, I'd like to use 3 minutes there rather than 30 seconds and make a short video like that. So I hear you, Yeah. That's it. It's that simple. Oh, there you go. The Synchro says my students can't spell pain in the ass without AI. I hear you, man. Well, that is the great quandary for real, or not, I don't mean real, but like high school and junior high and college teachers, to have to differentiate, the book report that is AI driven and not, really the work of a writer and everything. So I can appreciate that. Yeah. It's tough, man. Am I keeping you, Paul? I mean, do you want to get to Nigh Perfect or anything?
No, man. No, Nigh Perfect's in hospital sleeping it off right now.
All right, very good. No, and I understand and everything, but no, and I know you saw her this afternoon, but in case you needed to check with her, and no, I love talking to you, so no, that's cool.
I'm happy chatting with you, mate, anytime.
I absolutely feel the same. Someone said that, here it is. Synchro said, Sinners definitely couldn't have been a product of AI. What have you seen lately?
What have I seen?
Yeah. Have you guys had time to see anything?
Thunderbolts, funnily enough.
What's that? Nothing?
Thunderbolts.
Oh, Thunderbolts, of course. Yes, indeed. So, well, and again, I respect the NDAs, and I don't want you to reveal anything, but, it sounds like you were happy with the movie.
No, Thunderbolts is going to be the type of film that becomes like Guardians of the Galaxy and like, it becomes a thing that's not necessarily something that you associate with Marvel. I think it's Marvel-esque because it has the Marvel stuff that you need to have in it. But really, I think they did a good job of making it about mental health issues and about like how we overcome them together and things like that. So it's got a lot of found family stuff, which is really nice. I think Florence Pugh's great. I think all the actors were great. Actually, I think they really were. They were great. You sort of like this character. You don't like this character, and I'm thinking I don't like that character, and I'm like, oh, I get it. I know why I don't like that character. I'm not supposed to, So it's pretty clever. That they did a really good job. I think Jake did a fantastic job on it.
That's great, man. No, it's good to hear. And truly, I think we've all post Endgame been wanting, better content, and unfortunately, some of the movies post Endgame really didn't live up to.
I can't speak to it because I feel usually relatively uncomfortable about criticizing anybody's work, right? Because I do this for a living as well. Sure. And I think a lot of people in comics especially are drawn into loads of things where they criticize each other all the time. And I'm like, I don't want to be that guy. But I think it's fair to say I'm entitled to my opinion. I like this film. I don't like that film. I can definitely say positively that I think Thunderbolts is getting really good reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think it's probably going to do quite well and be the kind of film that they probably need. Now, the question will be whether or not, we can make more films that actually mean something and really mean something,
I do. And honestly, a couple of my buddies that are YouTubers and stuff have been talking about Thunderbolts and things. And also, sometimes the pre-production coverage, or I should say while a film is being produced, drives me nuts because it's like, just, make the movie and then talk to me, and
let it go. Like, I don't know why it's all hype when you've got a film that's halfway decent, doesn't need to be hyped. Just watch a film and you'll find out if you like it. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was pretty good. And, I think if you overanalyze it, it's too much. Find out yourself. One of my favorite films I ever saw was a film called The Big Blue. And every review of that film was like, this is stupid, it's self-indulgent, it's a terrible film. You know what the premise was? It was two guys that wanted to beat each other to the world diving, free diving thing. Who could go the lowest? And you start the film, you're like, this is going to end badly. I can see the tension in this film. That film was incredible. That film was brilliant, beautifully shot, really tense. But the reviews were like, it's boring, because at that moment in that part of history, they didn't want to watch a drama like that, and I did. So I would just say, look, go see Thunderbolts, see if you like it. Go see any film and see if you like it. I may go see Sinners eventually and then go, I hated that, right? Who knows? It's all about,
Yeah, no, and I'm not a horror guy, and everyone's like, well, it's not just horror, and it sounds really interesting. I love Ryan Coogler. I think he's a great filmmaker, and I love Michael B. Jordan. I think he's a great actor. Spider-Man Crawlspace says he's happy that Paul likes the Thunderbolts movie and the portrayal of the Sentry. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not the Sentry that I created, but it's certainly a good portrayal of the Sentry, and it's really nice that they got into him. You know what they did that I really liked? I can't speak too much of the Sentry and the Void. The Void and the Sentry do the things, right? And I actually had written it a little bit differently. What I do like is that most of what they talk about is Bob, because you've got this thing and you've got that thing. It's the collision in the middle. That story was always about the guy in the middle.
Sounds good, man. Can I ask a couple more questions about your run on the Sentry and everything? When tell me about, because I always appreciated, and even our first conversation we talked about this, the Hulk's relationship with the Sentry, and I always love that.
That always makes me smile, though. It always makes me smile because there are a couple of things surrounding the Hulk and the Sentry, right? First of all, I was Bill Sienkiewicz's editor on Big Numbers, and Bill had a really hard time when he was doing Big Numbers. I think it was really hard to manage Alan's scripts and the expectations put on him. The first two issues were so big and so difficult. They were in 9-panel grids. Bill had a bit of a meltdown, and he and I became really lifetime friends, partly because he had a meltdown. I'm not even kidding. I know it sounds weird, but it's like, it's just we went through a lot together. And then he left, and then there was this crazy story of what happened with Big Numbers, right? So many years go by, and I'm now at the top of my game or whatever at Marvel. I'm allowed to call some things out, and I call up Bill and it's like, Bill, would you be open to doing a book with me? I'd really love you to do one of the Sentry books that are the single issue ones. And Bill said, I'll tell you what, I can only think of myself coming back to comics and doing it if we can do 2-panel pages on every page. And I went, absolutely, mate. I'd be happy to. I think we tell a great story like that, and I think it will give you the feeling that you want and the ability to draw the way that you want to right now. The first thing I ever do in a comic is call the artist and ask them what they want to do, and Bill wanted to do that. So we did all these 2-panel pages, and in the story, it's just really sweet. It's just really sad and bittersweet, and it makes you go like, ah, because the Hulk, when the Sentry comes back and meets the Hulk, in the story, we basically had set it up that the Hulk, no one had ever asked him, why are you so angry in part? And part of the reason was because he was in physical pain. His skin hurt when he becomes the Hulk. And so when the Sentry is there, the Sentry calms him down and his skin doesn't hurt anymore. So he's like a little buddy. He was like a little loyal buddy to the Sentry. And he'd go, Hulk is best there is. Like, Hulk did good. And the Sentry go, yeah, you did good, buddy. And it was like this really sad little interaction between a loyal buddy and his mentor and the person that he loved. And then the Sentry goes away in the story, and now Hulk's angry and in pain a lot because he's lost his friend. And the Hulk is the only one that remembers the Sentry as well in the story. So it's this really special little thing. It was a great book. Bill's art is beautiful. We had done this relationship between the Sentry and the Hulk, and I'm like, man, I would love to write more of that relationship. The Sentry with the Hulk as his loyal sidekick is such an awesome story.
It's like of Mice and Men. It's George and Lenny. If you know that Steinbeck story and everything. Absolutely.
I suppose I'd have to, being a writer, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, Spider-Man Crawlspace says the Sentry Hulk book was awesome. I'm a big fan of Paul Spidey run, but his all too short run on the Hulk was also a big highlight. I wish he'd tackle that character again. Yeah, man. No, I know a lot of people that love your Hulk run, man.
Yeah, we got to do something that we got to do, that they were always asking me to do at Marvel, which is, can you write the ship and get the sales go back up and just level this book off? Because it was after Peter David's run, and Peter had been so successful for so long. And then they'd given it to John Byrne. And I'm loath to particularly have much to say about fellow creators, but I will say that I don't think John's run was right. Because John was positioning it as John Byrne's Hulk, and he was rewriting all his origins. I'm like, you don't need to do that. That means nothing in the cosmic scale of storytelling. And so John at some point had the Hulk jump through a plane full of innocent people and kill 179 people in a plane. And at that point, he becomes a mass murderer, and there's no redemption. I don't care if you say sorry or something else happened. You killed 179 people. That just changes it. So I came on the Hulk. And just like I did with Spider-Man, my thing on Spider-Man with Bucky was, why does he have no sense of humor anymore? That's what makes him who he is. Let's do funny stories that are interesting and fun, and then you can move your emotions, and you don't care about the fight unless you care about the people in the fight. And so with the Hulk, we gave him Lou Gehrig's disease, and now he had a ticking time bomb. He had that thing where the clock was ticking, and that's what makes the Hulk work. But really, I got to the point where I did 2 or 3 stories. I did this Abomination story with John Romita Jr. Then I did this story about the perfect life that he would have led if he hadn't been the Hulk. And once I was done there, I was like, I think I've said it. I left the Hulk myself by choice early, because I said I'm not an angry person particularly. I probably could write a lot more now. I'm much more angry now. But I've got a few things have happened since, so now I'm angry again. But I think the Hulk run that I did was what I needed to do. We gave him Lou Gehrig's disease. We gave him an out. We gave him these really difficult moments. We had these fundamental stories, especially one with the Abomination. Very proud of that, because I think people come to me all the time and say that was the Abomination story. And I like the fact that quite often in some of the works I've done, people have come to me and said that's kind of a seminal work. The Abomination one, the Green Goblin one I did, the Jekyll, the Two-Face story I did. Like I get a chance to really get into those characters.
I hear you, man. No, that's fantastic. I absolutely agree with you. This is interesting. That's interesting, Synchro. He says your opinion on film watching reminds him of David Lynch's Blue Velvet and its initial feedback. Yeah. Well, a lot of people didn't understand Blue Velvet right away.
They didn't get it, right? They didn't get it, and they would say, well, I don't get it, so why is it any good? And you're like, it doesn't matter if you get it. I think the point is, like, where are we going? What does it make us feel? How does it mean something? And clearly, if you don't like the fact you don't get it, then it's not for you, is it? Right? That's fine.
Sure.
Right? And if you really are moved by, a Star Wars film or something, great, right? If you can find something in the first 3, the Phantom Menace, whatever the
prequels,
and that was like this weird thing of like Star Wars just becomes like toy sales. And if you can find something in it, then it means something to you. Then it means something, right? And that's good. That's just as good as anything else.
Were they telling you, Paul, because you really were at that Avi Arad, Bill Jemas, Quesada period of Marvel? I was talking about this with Tim Seeley last night, because the term I had never heard before up until when I was starting to do Word Balloon, and that's toyetic. And that you design, you design a character a certain way to sell action figures or whatever licensed stuff. So did they ever discuss that with you when you were writing stuff?
No, they wouldn't have got anywhere with it either. I was always true to myself, and I would always say to them, hey, listen, that's not for me. So there was some stuff that they would do crossovers, and they do like stuff that I was supposed to. There's a story when I was writing Spider-Man and Hulk, that they said I handed in my issues for that month, but I was always writing single issues, and they're like, where's the Alien crossover? This is crossover month. I'm like, you might have wanted to tell me that before I wrote them. And they were like, didn't we send you the stuff? So they send me this thing for something. I can't remember what it is. And I'm like, I'm supposed to cross over with that? You've never told me. I know nothing about this. So I just did a Hulk thing and a Spider-Man thing that crossed over with some alien invasion event they did vaguely. But the stories just were single issue stories, and I was like, let's throw those away and move on,
Interesting. No, man, I remember when Civil War was happening for Marvel, and thankfully by then there was enough editorial cooperation with some creators, and Brubaker's like, listen, I'm doing my Daredevil thing. I don't want to be involved in this. And they're like, great, Ed, you don't have to be. Don't worry about it.
Civil War was pretty much to me because we had done we did almost all of Civil War Frontlines before Mark had written issue 2. I wrote 11 issues before they got to issue 2 of that. So there was a lot of the stuff, just literally built into the story was stuff that we had put in Frontlines,
Who was your journalist that gets in a
Sally Floyd? Floyd.
Sally Floyd, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
No, is she? No, great point of view character and a great contrarian.
I love her. She was able to do these things right. First of all, I had her be wrong in her comments. She had to be really opinionated, and it's not like people would say Jenkins must be really left liberal, right? This is worth talking about, actually. This is kind of how comics go when you're writing in the mainstream. We did Civil War, and they said you got to be neutral because it turns out the fans are all like getting behind this in politics form. Now, I'll tell you one person you don't want to talk about politics with, and that would be me. Because I don't do politics. I'm a child of the punk era, and if you get talking to me about politics, I will point out why your chosen politician is full of shit. And I will prove it to you with the spy index and all the crap that they've done for all this year. So don't yell at me about Republican or Democrat. But there's all these people yelling about Republican, Democrat. It turns out that people that were more Republican were really into Iron Man, who was for the registration, and people that were more Democrat or liberal or whatever, they were into Captain America. So I'm like, I can't be even-handed. She's writing for a left-wing newspaper. So you start writing the story, and she's making all these points and saying all these things, and they're like, Jenkins is a liberal crazy. And I'm like, you've got the wrong person. The opinions of the character are not the opinions of the management. Apparently, I'm doing a good job of writing a liberal character, right? But halfway through the story, she learned something, and she realized that she was wrong, that she's thought something was happening. And then at the very end of the story, so I thought that all the Republican people that were yelling at me online, like, you're such a liberal, you're such this, right? I thought they would go, oh, wait a minute. That's the opposite of what he wrote. Instead, it was crickets. No one said a word. They didn't go, oh, yeah, we were wrong about you. You must be on our side, which would have been wrong as well. They just ignored it, and no one said a word. And I'm like, man, I can't win with this thing.
No, you can't. And believe me, buddy, I've heard other creators have that frustration with fans that are readers that maybe turn on them and are no longer fans anymore. It's ridiculous. And again, you're never going to win.
No one's really done that. I haven't had any of that because I just don't do it. I don't play the game.
Good.
I will talk to people if they really want to talk about politics, and if they want to even talk about me and my politics, and I'll just point out to them, no, you feel shit. I didn't do any of those things. I never do any of those things. I don't, keep going and telling me what I am and what I think, and you'll be wrong. And a great example of that would be, 10 years ago or so, I chaired this advisory committee for the governor of Georgia, and I met him, and I was sort of like, I'm going to guess he's a Republican. I have no idea. And he asked me to do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Right. I'll do it because you're the governor of Georgia. Right. So absolutely. Well, he was a really nice guy. Turns out he'd been a Democrat and then he had become a Republican. He was the guy, Governor Nathan Deal, who when they came to Georgia with the heartbeat bill and Disney was all upset because they were doing the heartbeat bill, he vetoed the heartbeat bill. And he's like, listen, I went to church like 3 days a week my entire life. My church doesn't tell me to do this. So what a cool guy, right? And I couldn't have told you if he was Republican or Democrat, and I didn't care, right? We did what we were supposed to do and work out what the tax credits would do for Georgia. But I'll tell you this, mate, when I got into behind the scenes and he was trying to work out how he could actually sell the ideas that I'd consulted on and we brought forward, the maneuvering that had to happen for him to bring something to actually get it done was insane because of the insanity of the politicians he had to work with. It wasn't Republicans, it wasn't Democrats, it was all of them. Trying to get something done was impossible.
I understand. And, the crazy thing, and I was watching, who the hell was I watching? I can't remember, where they were talking about LA. It might have been that same show that I was referencing a few minutes ago about how now California wants to, or no, it was Bill Maher's show. I'll admit it, I watched Bill Maher's show. Mm-hmm. But they were talking about how California really wants to ape the tax credit system that Georgia has in place, that Louisiana has in place, these other states.
They'll need to do it if they want films to come back there, because one place I can't make a film is California.
Which is insane.
Yeah,
man. I mean, the bedrock, and I mean, when Chaplin and all those guys migrated to the West Coast, hell, Chaplin was here in Chicago before that.
They did it. They did it because it was warm out there and they could shoot all year round. Yep. Now I can shoot all year round in the middle of Siberia if I've got a studio, so it doesn't really matter as much,
And if you have a volume wall, and want to do any virtual set and everything like they're doing and everything.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Hilarious.
Well, Claudius is down here, like giving me his thoughts by brain, and it's funny. He has a lot of really strong opinions down here about film making and all that, and they all rhyme with treat. Give me a treat. Give me. I don't know what he's up to, but he's hidden down here. Like,
He's
being a
okay.
menace.
Greg McKean has an interesting question. He goes, how if all did Lee Weeks' art influence your approach to writing for him, or did you learn anything from how Lee puts a page together?
I don't think it's fair to single out Lee or Dave McKean or anybody, right? The answer to that question is yeah. I learn every time I work with an artist, because the first thing I do is call them up and say, what do you want to do? What do you like? Kyle Holtz, when I worked with him, he said, I hate drawing vehicles, right? And so I'm like, great, I don't want to put vehicles in. I don't have to. I can do any of these scenes without trying to get you in a place where you're miserable all day drawing a page that I wrote that you don't like, right? So it'd be the same with anybody that I work with, You call them up, you ask them what they like, you ask them what they're good at, you creatively adapt to that with the story that you work. The college lecture version of this is, if I'm working with Lee Weeks, then I'm the writer and co-director. Lee Weeks is the director of photography and co-director. And we're making that film, right, together. And so if I impose on them by just I don't understand it when anyone writes a script and then just leaves it as a bomb for an artist to do and never talks to them. So I think my work is informed by the artist's style and approach. Their work is informed by my style and approach.
I've heard writers have that same philosophy in your way, and I sadly have heard the writers that do exactly what you said you don't want to do, and they do it all the time. So yeah,
I can't imagine how you do that. That seems valueless in a medium that is a collaborative medium where you have to have an artist and writer in sync. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
I completely agree, but sadly, there's a lot of or not a lot, but there are a few know-it-alls, and some are of very distinct names.
I guess, yeah.
It's what are you going to do?
I probably wouldn't like talking to me then, because I don't know anything.
No. And we've danced around that you're, doing video games and everything. I don't know if back in the day, again, I think in our first conversation, you had just done the Hulk video game. I mean, 2005.
I've done, I think, 6 platinum selling video games that are big console games. A lot of the work that I started doing is really, I can say this, even though I'm talking about myself too much. A lot of the stuff that I did was back in the day, I did Soul Reaver, right? Which was like back in the mid 90s. We were doing stories about Gnosticism in the 90s, because I did it with Amy Hennig, and she ended up being the creative director at Naughty Dog that did Last of Us and, Uncharted, right? These story-based stuff was stuff that I innovated in. I innovated in gameplay. I did a lot of work outside of comics that people, if you're in the know in the video game business, you know what I did, right? Some of the innovations that I brought into storytelling in games, and I still do it, right? I love to do that stuff. I want to tell a story because I'm a new media guy. I'm a new technology guy, right? Well, in the mid 90s, video games were new technologies and new media. And now I get to do it all the time,
That's cool. Do you, I know there are people that think movies are kind of on the way out, and that it is games that are kind of becoming the new storytelling medium. What do you thoughts?
Yeah. When I did that thing for the governor, I had a conversation with him. I was supposed to meet him for half an hour, right? And I can't remember if I've told you this, but it's worth repeating if I haven't. I'm down at Georgia State University. They've asked me to come down and talk on behalf of the film industry in Georgia. But I'm really a guy that's not a lifetime filmmaker, right? I've worked in film animation, but I do a lot of stuff in video games, especially comics. But anyway, they bring me down because I've got this profile in my company, and then they bring someone from Tyler Perry's studio. They bring someone from Turner, and they bring three people in from Los Angeles, and one of them is an academic. And we are talking about this, that, and the other. And one of the things that's discussed is the brain drain. Why do we teach our young people? We put all this money into them in Georgia, and then we send them to Los Angeles. And this woman had stood up. She was the academic, and she said, I tell you what you need to do with your young people. You need to send them to me in Los Angeles, and where they need to have their hearts broken and their dreams crushed. And if they're still standing after 5 years, that's when I consider them realistically employable. And I said, and I'm quoting now, are you fucking serious? on this stage with all these like big-headed, you know, very wealthy and brilliant people and politicians and shit. And so the next thing that happens is I'm just like, I'm incensed because I'm like not prone to anger, but I'm like, you're gonna. I basically went. I always say I always went full on Oprah Winfrey, which for me is no good. I'm wagging my phone. Let me tell you something, honey. Across the stage, I'm so condescending, right? And I said, listen, you're where films go to die. We make films in this state, right? The thing is, I'm the only person standing up for Georgia. The other two were like, yeah, you got to do it on LA. Maybe we are lucky if we get some of the business. So I'm an immigrant to the state and an immigrant to the country, and I'm the one defending Georgia. And the governor's daughter was there, and she said, you got to meet my dad. So I go in to meet her dad, and I said, look, you got to understand, like, we have an opportunity here to do something. You're doing it with the tax credit, and you're bringing the work here. So the last thing you want to do is to train our young people to be grips and electricians. You want to train them to be writers. We want writers' rooms here. You want to train them to be directors, producers. We need to be doing that, right? And that's the bit that they completely ignored that I gave them the advice for. In the meantime, I said to him, can you tell me what the number one box office film is of all time? And at the time it was Avengers. And he went, yeah, I think I can say the Avengers. And I said, okay, so how much has it made? And he's like $1.5 billion. And I said, okay, now tell me the number one video game. He didn't know. And I said, well, at the time, I vaguely remember it was World of Warcraft, and it had made $12.5 billion. And I'm like, don't you want that business here? And that's the business you should be using. And the business it's repeatable business. You've got microtransactions. You should be doing that. People can entertain themselves with their own stories. So what Rockstar are making right now, that's what you're going to be able to do. When GTA 6 comes out, yeah, that's what you will be. You'll make your own films. You'll do your own stuff. So do that as part of your business, which I do. So I'm lucky in that.
That's great, man. That's outstanding. Couple pats on the back for Soul Reaver. Chud Babies says Soul Reaver owns, and Synchro. Yeah, Synchro says, Paul, I didn't know you worked on video games, nor was Soul Reaver. Sorry for the negative topic, but what's your take on the current state of the video game industry as layoffs are rampant?
Yeah, so it's like all the creative industries are all doing the same thing, right? They're all doing the same thing. It's just that they're laying people off because they think that they know that AI can write code, for example, right? So they're using the AI to write code and saying coders are obsolete, but that's not true because in the end, when you make really great games, it's going to be made by people. I think what you're seeing is these trashing of these industries, the creative industries, because they aren't going to live up to what's happening in the agreements with the actors. They're not really going to do it. It's not going to work that way. I think they're going to go and do the stuff that they were always going to do, make as much money, wrestle it out, get every drop of that money and give none of it to anybody. That's their model, and that's the model of their investors and their shareholders. So that's okay. Let them do that. I feel awful that so many great people in the industry are without work and they don't know how to get work. And I'm hopeful. Man, I'd be the spiritual figurehead of the creative industries and go like, come on, let's all go make it ourselves. Fuck these people. Let's get some funding. Let's go make it ourselves. We're better than they are. We'll compete against them and we'll make great money because we make stuff that people actually care about and they don't have to. So, I'm hopeful. I'm making some game stuff right now. So we'll see how it plays out.
Doing it on your own or working with company? Attaboy. Wow.
I'll get the funding in. We get the funding in. We make the games. We do the stuff. We put it out. Steam's fantastic. We can do it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just at a very, very large video game company literally 2 days ago, meeting with them out in LA about how to bring their stuff together. But always they're like, make our stuff. Our stuff makes itself because it's so popular. I'm like, that's what, did Marvel do that when they were in Chapter 11 bankruptcy? They brought us in to fix it. So you need fixing right now,
Completely agree with you, man. Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons why I love talking to you. You know that because truly, I this is what I've been doing with broadcasting and turning into podcasting and stuff. And yeah, so there you go. Well, dude, this has been a great 2 hours. And again, it's late your time, so I don't want to keep you up. But
I'm happy to always be here. And Claudius is just loving it right now because now he's got me sitting in one very still. So Claudius is down there and he's like upside down asleep.
Attaboy. That's beautiful.
I'm holding him with one hand.
Of course, that's all right. Again, man, I love when the pets walk past the camera and stuff. It always happens with Oming and Taki's cat. And a lot of people and stuff. So I love that, dude. Okay, another guy that's spent time in the video game world as well, like Oming. Yeah. So Paul, it's always great, man. I mean, do you want to cover anything else, or we can wrap? What do you want to do?
You know, just before we wrap, I do think there's something, you know, that you and I talked about pre-show, right?
Okay.
Which is an interesting. It's a bit of a. By the way, just so we're Carrie, Claudius is Claudius with W. Claudius because of his claws, and he actually has. Those of you who know video games, he actually has a kennel name. It is Ezio Clauditore because he sits on stuff and jumps on it like the Assassin's Creed character. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I had a thing today. I've had a thing over the last couple of days, and I think it's just so typical. I finally allowed myself to go relax and be at the Thunderbolts premiere. I was fine with it. But, you know, without getting to the specifics, I think the one thing that happened to me, you know, my wife had back surgery. I had to fly back. I was like sleep deprived, really tired, trying to make things work, and yet thinking, great, I've got one day of happiness. And that lasted about 12 minutes. Because next thing I know, there's this like scurrilous report about the creation of the Sentry and how it was really done. And I'm like, man, that's exhausting, right? They waited until the day of the premiere so they could get clicks, right? This slavery to clicks. And they wrote a story that was absolutely fundamentally, but more importantly, easily provably untrue, right? Where what this outlet did was basically, as I'm flying home and I'm sleep deprived, I've had 2 hours of sleep in like 2 days, I'm on a plane and they're writing to me saying, we want you to comment on this thing. And I'm like, let me tell you something. So they had a interview scheduled with me today, and they could have waited overnight to talk with me and get the real truth about the creation of the Sentry and the story. Instead, they said, you need to answer in the next hour or so because we're going to publish tomorrow morning. And I'm like, let me tell you something. I'm on a plane. I got spotty reception. But when I land, I'm going to the hospital because my wife's having back surgery. I've got to make sure she's okay. I shouldn't even be here on this plane. I should be at the hospital with her. So no, wait till tomorrow morning. And instead of waiting till tomorrow morning, I landed and they had published the report and they published it as true. I told them, if you don't wait to talk to me, you'll never talk to me, right? I'll never talk to you about this. And rather than admit that they had jumped the gun and said a bunch of stuff that was provably untrue and they should have waited for me, they doubled down and did a second report about what I might have said. And they picked something that I said from a report from years ago, which was really funny because that report was inaccurate too, because it didn't actually print the answers I gave them. So I want to say this, man, I respect your integrity. I really do. And I expect the integrity of people who are doing this right, because there is an awful lot of crazy right now. And if people look at this stuff that's being reported right now, it's actually kind of meaningless because frankly, it got a few, you know, it's not going to mean anything to me, to Marvel or whatever, but it does suck because it's a way of taking something that's good and then tearing it down immediately in the search of clicks. And then when they got called out, these internet reporters decided to double down and ignore it and then start lying to my publicist about how it actually happened. That stuff's no good, man. Like, I want us to get past that. I want us to get past this partisan politics stuff. Republicans and Democrats, for the most part, probably, if they saw someone hurting, would just go over and give them a drink of water. Like, people are people, right? We're being driven apart by this crap. So if there's anything for me to say, it would be, I wish that we got past this like negative approach to everything because we think it's important. None of that shit's, take it from a punk, right? None of that shit's important. We told you so 40 years ago, and I've been telling you ever since. None of that stuff is important. Don't do it.
I absolutely hear you and agree with you, Paul. I don't do critiques on my show. I talk to people and think about things that I like.
Yeah, right.
And I'm sure I would get 20 times, if not 50 times, the audience if this were a hate channel.
That's the thing, is that we're all drawn to this hate channel kind of stuff, but it's like, look, you know, stay here, man, stay here. You know, like, I didn't need to be being pressed for an answer on something that was completely made up, provably untrue, while I'm trying to get to the hospital because my wife's in pain, right? Yeah. And I've got someone pressing me to say, I'm gonna hijack your moment and we'll come up with some scurrilous story that's not true. And I'm like, man, this is awful, right? Like, what have we become? I don't think we're getting past this unless I'm going to give you guys a politics thing at the end, right? Take a look at the SPY index, SPY, Spy Index. If you're a Republican, take a look at it and honestly see how many of your politicians beat the expectation of the return on the stock market, because it's a lot. And if you're a Democrat, take a look at how many of your politicians are destroying the stock market. In other words, they're all doing it. And if you can't wake up and see that and start talking to people and be friends with each other, we're not going to get anywhere. And I want us to get somewhere.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Spy Index, is that some of you Google? What is
yeah,
it?
Just look up SPY. Yeah, it just basically shows how people perform against the stock market. And so you can see your chosen politicians and see what they're doing and to steal your money, because it's literally a scam conducted right in front of your eyes. So why don't we start forgetting these chuckleheads and start like working together to do really cool stuff? That's how good art is made. That's how good films are made. I don't make my stuff for Republicans or Democrats. I make it for people. And I hope everybody kind of starts to find that, you know.
It's the analogy you kind of refer to in terms of, you're right. You know, a snowstorm happens on your block, and all of a sudden the Republicans and the Democrats go out and help, dig out somebody's car.
Yeah,
and their politics don't matter. They're just trying to help each
doesn't
other.
matter, right? I never see it. And yeah, that's just the way it is. So anyway, I don't know if that's a preach, but it's more like I dealt with that today, and I was like, man, all of this divisive crap in the face of something that's really cool, right? Like, why are we divisive? Let's get past that, man. That's why I like coming on with you, John.
And truly, buddy, I appreciate that. And here, a couple comments from the people. Synchro says, "Sorry you had to deal with that, Paul. Hope your wife is recovering well." Spider-Man Crawl Space, Ugh, that's awful, man. Sorry you had to deal with that crap. I hope for a fast recovery for your wife. There you go, man. No, and I know people listening can sympathize as well.
She's all right. She gets really stoned. She's hilarious when she wakes up from surgery. She floats above the bed. Last time when she had a gallbladder out a few years ago, I arrived at the hospital and I knew I was a little bit late, and I arrived there. But this is the last anecdote I'll leave you with. So I get to the hospital, and it's the day. This was years ago. She had gallbladder disease when she was pregnant with our oldest. It's that long ago, right?
Yeah.
And she couldn't eat any fat. She put on like 5 pounds in her pregnancy. So now we take her to have a gallbladder out. And this is right around the time that I'm doing like Civil War or something, or Frontlines, or maybe actually Wolverine Origin. So I've got this call schedule with loads of the biggest retailers with Tom Brevoort, the editor. I get to the hospital and she's like, it takes longer for her to wake up. But when she wakes up, I hear her. She's in the hallway and she's yelling, "Hello, everyone. Is anyone in the hospital sad? Is anyone sad? I want you to come and see me because I'll make sure you're not sad." So she's stoned out of her mind, right? And she. So now I walk in, she's like levitating above the bed, and I sort of like pull her down and like, "Babe, listen, I've got to get on the road in a minute because I've got to do this call." And she's like, "I love everyone," right? So I drag her out, yelling and screaming, put her in the car. So I said, "Look, I've got to be on a call." The true story. I've got to be on a call because I've got to talk to these retailers. And she's yelling and laughing. She goes, "Tell you what," she goes, who are you talking to? And I said, "Just talking to retailers." She said, "Is it a girl?" And I said, "No, I'm not talking to a girl. I'm not talking to a girl." She says, "Is it Klingons? I hate Klingons." So now the call starts, and I've put it on mute and Brevoort's wondering like why I won't respond. And I'm like, "Babe, you got to shut up." Now I get stuck behind a giant chicken truck. There's a chicken truck in front of me, and it's covering me with feathers. And there's a cop car behind me, and she's yelling out the window, "Hello, everyone! I love you." And I'm like, I'm trying to do it. So and Brevoort, right, is wondering what's he doing. Like, why isn't he joining this? And I'm like, "Yeah, that's really good." And then she'll yell something, "Hello, Klingons," and I'll be like, "No,
Klingons,
anything, right?" And so eventually, I'm just, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, the blue lights go on, and I'm getting pulled over, and I'm like, "You can't be serious!" In the middle of the biggest retailer. So I pull over, and the car goes around me and pulls over the chicken truck.
Oh, thank God.
He slides down the seat and falls asleep and starts snoring on the floor, and then I do the call with the retailer. Like, that's life with my wife. So there you go.
That's excellent, man. No, and the chat is enjoying it, so that's outstanding.
She's one
Jesus
of a kind.
Christ.
Yeah.
No, that's
right.
Well, but and really, thank you for coming back these 20 years. And I know we'll have many more conversations, and it's always great catching up with Paul Jenkins.
Anytime, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Hey, tomorrow night, speaking of Wolverine, one of the current boyfriends of Wolverine, Ben Percy, going to be joining me for a fun conversation. So that'll be cool. And yeah. So, and hey, I'm sure we're all excited to see what exactly the filmmakers and the actors do with the Sentry and the rest of the Thunderbolts coming up this week. So that'll be a lot of fun. All that coming up and more on Word Balloon Live. Thanks a lot for watching and listening. Until next time, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.